6:01 p.m. Present tonight is Councilman Podeska, Councilman Wilden, Councilman McComber, Councilwoman Bart, Councilman Porter. Almost had two Podeskas, one at each end. So we have a quorum for tonight. I've asked Councilman Porter to lead us in our invocation, and then Lucas Smith with Troop 1021 will come up and lead us in our pledge.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity for us to gather together this evening to discuss the business of the city of Saratoga Springs, and we ask thee to please bless us with discernment that we can make the decisions which are the best interest of our city, both in the near and in the near and the long term. We can plan for the success of this city and its future growth. We ask thee to please bless those first responders that are out serving the citizens, that they'll be protected and watched over. And we ask that thou bless the members of the armed forces that are serving overseas, defending our freedoms. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Please, may the audience please rise. Repeat the pledge after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you. Okay, public input. Time has been set aside for the public to express ideas, concerns, and comments. Please be respectful in your comments. Please try and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please avoid repetitive comments. Mark Christensen will be there. Watch our time tonight. If you're here for the public hearing, please hold your comments for the public hearing on the consideration of adopting amended parks, recreation, trails, and open space. Anybody here for public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close that portion of the meeting. Presentation, we have the introduction of the Jordan River Director. Oh, Kara, that's yours? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Soren Simonson, the still relatively new director of the Jordan River Commission. I joined the commission in last July, although I've been involved with the commission since its creation back in 2010, and it's a privilege to be in front of you. Thank you for the invitation to join you this evening. Sorry, let me turn this on. There we go. So you may be familiar with the Blueprint Jordan River. This is the guiding document that was created now a decade ago, back in 2008, which is the vision for the development of the Jordan River over the last decade. And it's been a great tool. Let's see, this doesn't seem to be advanced. I'll just tell you. Okay, next one. You can just scroll through these. It lays out a vision for rejuvenation, revitalization, and development of the Jordan River through Utah County, Salt Lake County, and Davis County. One more. Next one, David, if you will. And there are 7 overarching goals that are part of the Jordan River Blueprint: preserving and rehabilitating the river itself, conserving and restoring the shores and the banks and areas along the river that are suitable for conservation and wetlands and other things, managing stormwater. Water quality has been a big issue in the Jordan River for many years, and the work that we do collaborating with communities to improve water quality makes it more suitable for recreation, both in the water and along the banks. Developing buffers between the river and the built environment has been a goal. Integrating complementary development, removing physical barriers to boating. It is a navigable waterway. Not everybody knows that, and it's a lot of fun paddling and boarding and kayaking and other water activities that take place, and those are growing. And then encouraging regional transportation through the development of a regional trail. And we're very excited that just this last November, about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, we actually celebrated and marked the completion of the entire 45-mile trail from Utah Lake to the Great Salt Lake, with the completion of the bridge over the railroad lines by the Utah State Fair Park. There were a couple other sections in the south part of Salt Lake Valley that were also completed last year. So it's a now continuous trail, and we're excited to have that part of the Jordan River goals completed. We're currently comprised of 15 cities, 3 counties that the river flows through or are near the river. We have 2 state agencies, the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, and the Division of Water Quality, that also serve on our board. The legislative appointee, which is currently vacant. The previous appointee became the county recorder for Salt Lake County, and we're looking for his replacement soon. The governor's office, and then we have 6 special districts along the river. 5 of those are water and wastewater treatment facilities, as well as Utah Transit Authority. And then we have a number of ex officio partners, including stakeholders like Rocky Mountain Power, which has a power corridor that parallels the river, and other similar organizations, as well as a few nonprofits like Tracy Aviary and Boaters Club and some others. We're managed, we have several documents that help with the management and the work we do. Those include the best practices and the comprehensive management plan, which was actually just completed about a year ago, the first management plan for the river in its history. We also have a strategic plan which guides our actions, and that strategic plan, right now, we have, in the next slide there, we have 5 kind of comprehensive strategies that are our focus. These include completing the trail, and in addition to the trail itself, we're also including as part of that connections to the trail, improving water quality, restoring ecological integrity, marketing and outreach to make people aware of the great resources for recreation, for education, and for learning along the river, and then expanding our funding. And we're very excited. This afternoon we just had the House unanimously pass at the state legislature a $500,000 annual appropriation bill that now moves on to the Senate. Representative Winder from West Valley City is the sponsor, and we've had great support, about 60 co-sponsors up and down the river corridor and throughout the state. And that will actually bring some annual funding both to help with patrolling and policing on the river, including in your community, as well as some targeted funds around a new homeless resource center being built in South Salt Lake and the general vicinity. We have a lot of current projects we're working on. We coordinate a lot of volunteers. Last year we had almost 3,000 volunteers work on projects up and down the river corridor, including here in Saratoga Springs. We also have, next slide, we have a lot of volunteers participate in our restoration efforts, and this includes removing trash, removing invasive species, particularly puncture vine, which we know is problematic in many areas of the river. But the more volunteers we have, the more work that we can do. We've got a full-time volunteer coordinator that works with us to manage all of these volunteers each year, and we're doing some really amazing work. Next slide. Some of you may have participated in our Get in the River Festival. This used to be a 2-day event in May. Up until this last year, in 2017, we launched a month-long Get in the River Festival that included participation by all 16 cities up and down the river corridor and all 3 counties. We had about 35 events over a 30-day period. Some of them were restoration-oriented, a lot of them were recreation, fun and games, and we're hoping to expand the program this year and hope we can continue to count on Saratoga Springs being a great community partner. We also do technical assistance. We work with other partners and look at development of ideas, research, and other things that we can support either with in-kind or some small grant funding. The next slide identifies some partner programs. We're currently working on closing a gap, working with Salt Lake County between the Parties Trail, which is about an 8-mile trail from the mouth of Parties Canyon in Salt Lake County, that will connect the Bonneville Shoreline Trail to the Jordan River Parkway Trail. And there's just about a 4-block segment at the Jordan River end of that we're working to close that gap with some funding and participation. Next slide. We have a really fun program that we're partnering with the University of Utah called Urban Rangers, and we have about 20 students who volunteer a 3-hour shift every week and help patrol the Jordan River corridor. They're currently doing about a 6-mile stretch, and we're hoping with the state funding that is currently in front of the legislature to greatly expand this program and perhaps expand to other institutions. We'd love to partner with BYU and UVU here in Utah County and do additional patrolling in a section of the river that could benefit from their eyes and ears and oversight and just being a friendly face on the river corridor to help support users on a daily basis. The next slide shows a wayfinding signage program that's currently in process to help identify routes along the river corridor and to get people to destinations and make this more user-friendly. And then the next slide, which is the last one, shows community engagement work that we do. We're trying to expand our partnership with places like the Living Planet Aquarium, Hogle Zoo, Tracy Aviary, and local school districts and schools to expand education, a lot of the environmental education that happens with 4th and 5th graders, with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, even with high school students, and research projects at the academic level to make the river a useful tool in doing research and education about the natural world and the great recreation opportunities that exist. The last slide just shows some contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have right now. Just wanted to provide a brief introduction for myself, and if you're not familiar with the Jordan River Commission, to let you know about the work that we're doing with all of the agencies that we coordinate to make the Jordan River a real jewel in our region. Thank you for your time. If you would like to, we've got our contact information there for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Like us, find us, follow us, tweet us, and share that information. We'd love to grow that base because it's a really great outreach tool to use these social media tools that are available today.
Councilwoman Bartz?
Just a couple of questions. I know Kara and Councilman Wilden go attend the Jordan River Commission meetings. Just some follow-ups, and part of this is for staff, part of this is for you as well. But we had originally, maybe 3 years ago, been promised some bike maintenance stations for the trail areas, and as far as I know, we have yet to see those. 2 or 3, if I remember correctly. I think it was 3 also. Do you know what happened to those?
I don't. My institutional knowledge is not probably what it could be, and so, but I'll make note of that, and I'll work with Kara to find additional information about what was promised, and we'll make sure we circle back and find a way to make good on that.
That'd be great. Also, we've been working on getting a couple of river launches put into the river, and this is a little bit more for staff probably, but I don't just wondering where we were at on working with the state engineers on that, Army Corps of Engineers on that, and getting those done. Okay, and then the other thing is the Phragmites. So this is normally the time, so I'm on the Lake Commission, so I'm familiar with the process a little bit there. Normally, you know, they're sprayed in about August, and then this is the time of year where you work them under the water and get them ready to start decaying. Where are you at on that? We have several areas within our city boundaries anyway that actually that do actually have a shallow enough bank to be able to get in and actually smash those with either some with little bobcats, but with the land tamers or marsh masters and things like that. So where are you at on that? And have you spoken with Laura Alt of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to work with that? Yes,
in fact, that's a major focus. We tend to focus on things that partners bring to us, and we know Utah County, both through the county and through the cities. Lehigh City just recently joined the Jordan River Commission, and that opens up a lot of new opportunities to partner here. We've just applied in an initial round for a $200,000 grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We have commitments of about $80,000 from the State Forestry, Fire, and State Lands Division, as well as other public and private partners. In all, we have a budget of about $300,000, and much of that will go to Phragmites removal throughout the entire river corridor, but we're planning to focus a significant effort here in Utah County because everything that goes to seed here ends up depositing further down the river, and so we know one of the best ways to manage is to attack it at the headwaters. The work that's been going on Utah Lake has been fantastic, and that helps us, so we're grateful for your work on the Utah Lake Commission.
Note that in speaking with Laura, this is usually the time when Forestry, Fire, State Land crews have some downtime, and they're willing to come out and help, and they've said that before.
Yeah.
So that's somebody who you should be getting in contact with, because like I said, this is the time of year to be doing that, and we have several areas where you can actually use those.
Yeah, the techniques on the river are a little bit different than they are on the lake because of the steeper banks, and so we're doing some work right now with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to identify what are the tools and resources we may need to acquire to be able to do the work. A lot of it happens from the water side, and so having crews with boats and that can go out with spray equipment and things like that are important. So we are trying to find ways to better address Phragmites removal on the river. We did some experimentation through some other grant funding through Forestry, Fire, and State Lands and the Division of Agriculture over the last year, and those seem to be proving to be really productive techniques, and so we're going to try and expand that this year. And like I say, Utah County is going to be a primary focus for us for probably the next 2 years or so.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great questions.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you for taking your time tonight.
Great pleasure to be with you. Thank you. Good luck.
Okay, we have the presentation of the sewer rate study.
Yes, Mayor, Council, we have Jonathan Ward with us with Zions Bank this evening. Specifically, this is in response to the request that we had at the retreat when we did our retreat back in January. We discussed what it would look like for us to be able to accomplish all of our sewer projects. And so we brought Jonathan in to share with you some of the information that we've gathered since that time. We're getting ready to start moving forward with some of our sewer projects, and we just need to circle back and have some of these discussions. So with that, Jonathan, would you mind stepping forward? You're welcome to have a seat at the table. Just bring it over here and I'll get it.
Mayor and Council, it's nice to be back with you again. Focus on this question of what are capital projects. Okay, and what are capital projects looking like going forward, as well as who can help pay for those capital projects. So my partner Susie Becker was tasked with updating the sewer rates based on the latest and greatest. We've also been involved with the engineers who are familiar with the sewer system to look at capital projects lists and when those capital projects would come into play. And when we're asked, can we afford to do any of these projects and how do we come up with these solutions, we look at two things. First, what is your financial situation like today? And could you afford or have financing bonds rated today based on your financial metrics? And then going forward, is it likely that those metrics would remain the same or improve? So based on a couple of different things, we've been able to demonstrate, yes, we feel confident you can do a chunk of these capital projects, but not all of them on your own. In particular, some of these projects, well, if you did them all, it would cost too much. You wouldn't be able to afford it as a city on your own. But this worksheet we've sent out here is a current picture of key debt ratios that the rating agencies review. And if you look through that, this is based on 2017 information, population, household size, or household income levels versus U.S. income levels, user fee revenue, connection fee revenue, impact fee revenue, what were your operating expenses in the sewer fund. You go down through all of that data and input to the utility ratios on the bottom table and how they compare to both Standard & Poor's, who currently rates your water revenue debt, and they publish a couple of ratios, but we also compare it to ratios published by Fitch Ratings for various ranges of ratings, a AA and a single A, because likely if the city were to go and sell bonds, municipal bonds for sewer projects, you'd fit within this A to AA range. If you'll look with me at, for instance, household income levels, the median household income levels based on 2016 figures was $80,000. Now relative to AA rated water and sewer systems across the country shows your income levels are significantly higher than those of AA rated water or sewer systems or single A rated water or sewer systems. And as a percentage of the national median household income, you're significantly above where S&P would say would be an extremely high ratio, or the medians for the AA and single A rated entities. In each of those line items, if you just scan across, you see you're right in the ballpark if the city sold up to $15 million of sewer bonds to cover an estimated $30 million of project costs. That's sort of where we envision from a debt ratio standpoint, the city would sort of tap out. That would be the max, in our opinion, based on current ratios, current revenues, current expenses, which would mean that basically half the capital projects on the capital projects list could be funded by the city. The other half would have to be funded by other resources, i.e. developers who are trying to develop property within the community would have to fund their own projects in order to free up capacity. But this is only a snapshot. The other, well, I looked through some of these ratios. All of them look very reasonable, very standard, very strong. The only worry in my mind is perhaps the debt service coverage ratio without the inclusion of impact fees going forward. It gets pretty tight, and as a minimum, we like to see this ratio, the coverage without IF, we've labeled it, we like to see that at a minimum of 1 times, and we've met that based on 2017 financial data. We're just over 1 times at a 1.06. There are ways to help improve that coverage ratio based on how we structure amortization schedules. You don't necessarily need to have an equal amortization schedule every single year. You can have $1 million in each year with the exception of 2, one a little lower and one a little higher, which enables you to meet this sort of minimum thresholds. But again, this is a snapshot at where we stand today. Based on this, we think that the city would be rated in the A to A plus range. If we're really lucky, a AA minus range by the rating agencies, were we to sell $15 million of sewer revenue bonds. That's a reasonable rating. It's not a AAA, obviously, but to get to a AAA would require more time, more work, more connections, more reserves, a whole lot more of everything that we're already doing well as a city. But this is a manageable amount, a manageable target without raising sewer rates, without going back to the residents, back to the trough, so to speak, and asking for more from the residents. Again, this is a snapshot. The other thing we have to look at is what does it look like going forward? Because today's numbers are great so long as they're sustainable tomorrow. So Susie went through the analysis on the sewer rates, and based on the number of connections, based on the composition of those connections, meaning residential versus commercial, based on usage historically, she's able to put together a model that basically proves out if we stay on this track, we can do up to $15 million without raising rates to the residents, using existing growth as it's anticipated, using existing reserves as they currently stand, and using other resources besides the city to help fund the capital projects. I'd be happy to go into more detail about the model that Susie created or any of the debt ratios as you see these, or answer other questions that you might have.
So if I could, let me jump in a little bit. What Jeremy and I and Jonathan and kind of the team has been working on is how do we build all these things? Per your request at the council retreat, we have approached a couple of the developers that are large contributors that have some projects that are very specific to providing a beneficial use of their area. We've asked them to participate. We still haven't gotten hard answers back from them, but we're still pursuing that. In essence, what we would be proposing is, and at some point in the near future, we'll bring back to you a list of projects But what we're proposing and kind of the methodology that we wanted to bring back to you tonight was, as Jonathan said, we think we could qualify for about $15 million right now with no tax or with no utility fee increase. We are trying to kind of juggle which projects are the highest priority. We want to get to a gravity outfall system. We would be proposing that we would be building segments of different segments of the sewer system and making certain improvements. Our goal would be to come back with a plan that would kind of map out that list of projects, and basically once we get to the end of the money that we would be committing to, we would basically say, okay, developers, you come and connect to our gravity sewer outfall line, and then that becomes their expense as we move forward. And so we'll have a little bit more in-depth conversation, but it's just building on what we discussed at the retreat. We think that the number will be somewhere between the 10 number, 10 on the low end to something less than the 15, depending on what segments of the sewer we want to build. We'll bring back a kind of an a la carte menu and let you pick which segments you feel you'd like to commit to moving forward. We do have capacity issues, and so that's why we're having this conversation. We're going to run out of capacity in our lift stations at some point, and we think that we've got a pretty good plan that will allow us to strategically move forward with we think the right bits of infrastructure, and then allow for growth to build the rest of it as time and as growth demands it. So that's the plan that we're going to be having. Jeremy, is there anything you wanted to add?
Pointed out pretty clearly, there's a minimum probably of $10 million worth of projects necessary to get some flows off of the lift station so that we can continue to have capacity. We'd love to work with developers to get the $15 million worth of projects built, because that would give you a true gravity system with extensions to the north and the south, with a lot more area that is ready to connect to. The $10 million list of projects does leave some gaps, but we think we can fairly go to developers and say those gaps are on you to help complete, whether that's through the Jordan Promenade project or PRIs or the church's property. We're also looking at going after a Watt Smart grant. As you know, when we remove a lot of the gravity flows or a lot of the sewer flows off the lift station, there'll be substantial energy savings to the city, because that sewer will no longer have to be pumped. And so we're also looking at grants. Those are not, in the big scheme of things, they're not necessarily big dollar amounts, but they do help. But of course, even though those grants only give you credit for the first year of savings, the city will recoup those savings in perpetuity on the reduced electrical cost of having to pump sewage when it can be gravity flowed to the treatment plant.
So one other thing that I failed to mention and we haven't talked about yet is the first chunk of projects will be these projects in the next about 3 years is really what it would be. And then we would probably need to have a conversation about 2025 about having an additional lift station, as well as one other significant gravity outflow line being built at that time. And so we would be looking at probably about another $10 million in about 9 years is what we anticipate. Well, and the nature of what we're trying to do is kind of stretch this out so that the people that will be using it will be queued up and they'll be paying for it. And so that's part of why we'd be looking at doing that. Doesn't make sense to build all of it now because we don't need it yet, but we certainly want to make sure that we stay ahead of growth and have an opportunity for us to be able to utilize the full capacity of the system as we build it out. So we'll come back to you with more of that. One question that we would like some direction on from you as a council is are you comfortable with us coming back with a parameters resolution with some more of those details and start moving forward with the issuance of a sewer bond series? And the parameters resolution kind of paints that picture, but we discussed all the various projects at the retreat, and the question for you really is, are you comfortable with us bringing forward a parameters resolution and a little bit more detail of that plan going forward?
Councilman Wilden?
Yes.
No, I thought you had a comment.
Oh, no, I just, sorry.
I saw you grabbing that mic with urgency.
I do have a comment. At the retreat, we talked a little bit about kind of I see this is basically covering two of the three options that we kind of discussed, is, paying for it all by ourselves, getting the developers to help with some of it, and going out and what could we get without having to raise rates. I brought up, I wanted to know as a baseline, what can we buy with cash on hand? And I still haven't gotten that piece, and until I get that piece, I'm not comfortable discussing a parameters resolution.
So in answer to your question, if we were to take and spend all of our cash at this point, it would take us out of position to be able to bond. So it would probably get us about the first $5 million in projects, but financially we would have basically spent some of the money needed for coverage ratios and things of that nature. So Jonathan.
And we had this discussion at the council retreat, and I understand that fact. However, I want to know how many years of coverage, how many years of service can we buy with cash on hand? I understand you want to maintain a piggy bank so that we can go out and bond. I'm not as convinced that we have to bond at all, and so you need to make that case to me before I'm going to discuss a bond.
We can get you that answer. As Mark pointed out, we have two bottlenecks that we're approaching as we grow. The big is the two main lift stations. So the one that's closest to capacity, I think we pointed out, is the Inlet Park lift station. The other one has more time left in the time frame. So I'll get you an answer on that. Basically, if we keep adding connections to the south, when does that lift station run out of capacity? There are some improvements we can do with cash on hand, but ultimately the decision is we either need to do a substantial upgrade and capacity of that lift station at a certain cost, or we need to get those flows off gravity. So what I can get you is I can get you without the substantial upgrade, the minor upgrades that we can fund cash. How many more years left on that? Off the cuff, I want to say it was like 2 or 3.
Okay.
What the cost, and we went through this before when we did the 2014 or 15 study, for the several $1 million project of upgrading the capacity, then that would add so many more years. Then you're in a perpetual cycle, I guess at that point of every upgrade you do, maybe you get 5 or 8 or 9 more years of capacity, then you have to add another pump and another pump.
Right.
Do you want that? Do you want just to know the short term, or which one do you?
I'd like to know both.
Okay.
I understand, and I understand the path we probably will have to go down.
Right.
Is bonding.
Right.
But I don't think we should discuss bonding until we see what we can afford pay as you go. And I understand the arguments that are going to be made for why bonding,
Right.
but the people in the future are also going to pay for the future improvements. And so I just, we've bonded for a lot
Sure.
in the past several years, and I would like to see us, see if we can go without maxing the credit card.
I'll get you a memo that covers both the short-term capacity upgrades, and then it's kind of a memo I think we did back in 2015, but I'll repackage it so you can see again the iteration where we do continuous upgrades to the pumps versus the iteration of a one-time
Right.
gravity, and then you don't have to have upgrade again. So
No, and I'd appreciate that, because I just want to see the case of,
Sure.
if we go down this step-by-step process, it could end up costing more, to get where we need to get, instead of
just my memory, when we did this discussion back in 2015, and I think it was Councilmember McComber that requested that life cycle analysis. It was about a 20-year, where the electrical savings, where your capital costs obviously are more upfront, but after about 20 years, and that was the analysis done in 2014. Your energy savings at that point surpassed the infrastructure costs to convert to the gravity system.
Right.
But I can get that back information to you.
No, and I appreciate, I know most of the council was here for that, but I wasn't on the council at the
Sure.
time, so I didn't get to see all that. So, thank you.
Councilman Wilden?
I legitimately have something to say this time. No, to Councilman Porter's point, I think it's good to have that conversation about cash funding. Let's just not wait to have that conversation, then come back another time to have the bonding conversation. I don't see any reason not to have them together, because then if we need to make a decision to do a bond, we don't have to set up meetings in perpetuity for that.
I won't wait for the council meeting. I'll prepare that memo and send it out as soon as it's available. So,
In fact, Councilman Porter, if we can, when we meet next, we can schedule that for a conversation.
Councilman McComber?
I just want to point out, it's sort of mentioned briefly, but for those who are in the audience today, we're working very closely with the developers who are causing a lot of the burden of having an increased sewer capacity, and we're making sure that they are representing their increased demand on our systems so that it's not just you as current residents having to foot the bill for all this new development, because I know there's many in the room who'd probably rather not have any new development, though they have their rights as well. So we are working with them closely, and even if had some verbal confirmations with some of them that they're willing to take on the burden of their part of the sewer capacity, and where we might upsize something for the greater good of the city of Saratoga Springs, then that's where a lot of this money would go into and helping with that. So I think that's a great partnership. We work closely with our developers so that you as residents aren't held to holding the entire burden, and those who are looking to move here in the next few years. Thanks.
Perfect. Do you need anything else from us?
No, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan.
Do you need
And I'm in
anything
favor
for
of
me? That's the question.
doing it.
Anything else for me?
Nope. I'm sure we'll have more later.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, reports from the council. Anybody have a report? Councilwoman Barch?
Question for you specifically, Mayor. Where are we at on filling the planning commission position?
Mark and I spoke about that today. He was going to work. Did you guys sync up today?
Okay. That would be good if we could get our.
That's why we talked earlier today.
Yeah, perfect. Also, just as a note to the rest of the council, at our Lake Commission meeting this week, I was appointed as chair of the Lake Commission. Yay. And Mark Seastrom from Orem will be serving as the vice chair for that for this year. Also, just a quick update. I spoke last time about HB 175, which is the Oversight Committee bill, and that is on the, I believe, the third reading calendar for the House. So that should be coming up here shortly. It looks like it's probably going to pass the House, even though it's insane, and the sponsor can't even explain why it should happen. That being said,
How is our representative on this?
Our representative is mixed in that he understands our concerns, but he also says that there's other background that we don't know about, which
Okay,
is
I'll be
hard-
reaching out to him.
Yeah, is a hard explanation to take without more.
I hate that kind of
Information.
explanation.
Yeah.
You imagine if we tried to do that at the city level?
Yeah. So that being said, I think we might have a little bit more ability to fix that at the Senate level, it sounds like. So I don't know, Mark, do you have more on that one?
No. I think also if you could reach out to Senator Andreg, that would be great as well.
Let him know it's coming.
Yeah, and on that same note,
175.
Senator Andreg has a bill, 204, Senate Bill 204, where I think it's good. What he's trying to do is create a deadline whereby cities that have secondary water systems can basically require them to get meters going, and he wants to get cities metering that have secondary water systems. His effective date, though, was May 9th of this year. And so if you're a city that's not currently doing any metering, to begin requiring a meter effective May 9th is probably a little bit overly aggressive. I was contacted by the league earlier today. We're going to be working with them on getting them some information that we generated in our process and our project. I think what he's looking at is noble. It's the right thing to do. It's what we did, and we were very pleased with the results on that, but it might be a little bit overly aggressive, and I think that that's some of the concern that might be out there.
Is there anything, Mark, I'm not up to speed on this one. Is there anything talking about the state helping other cities out with metering? That's one of the things that we wanted to watch to make sure that, we put all of this time and money into making sure our metering system was up and going.
Proof of concept.
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, Senator Andreg's bill, and to be very clear, his bill would just mean all new construction after May 9th would require a meter on their secondary account, which again, I think is a little bit ambitious because, the development community probably won't like the fact that, hey, wait a second, we've already got approved plans, we've already got approved, and these cities may not even have standards that they would then be able to turn to, not to mention to retrofit all of the lots and things like that are currently available. It might become a very difficult thing. And so, again, there's a lot of bills up there this year that, are working through the process, but that was just something that earlier today I was asked if we could participate with as a city, and so we'll be getting that information here the next day or so.
And one other bill of interest is SB 120, and that's a taxes and fees bill. So there are some cities that have a lot of tax exempt users in their city, and they have decided to charge a road utility fee, because although you may not be paying property tax because you're tax exempt, you still have to pay your utilities. And this bill, SB 120, seeks to allow counties and states and a couple of other exempt entities to get out of that, even though they have heavy usage on the roads. And this is kind of one that we've been watching as well.
Well, pass them and then exempt yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting because there have been several cities, and we might get to this point too with the different entities that are coming into the city at this point.
Nonprofit hospitals.
Where we've got a lot of nonprofit entities coming in, and it's a little frustrating to have somebody who is such a heavy user on a road system not pay anything at all into that road system. So while it doesn't affect us directly right now, it could in the future, and in general, this is another one of those bills that is, again, overreach into local control, trying to make sure that their local systems are functioning properly. So that's another one to kind of watch and perhaps talk to our senator and representative on. The others that I missed on those, Mark?
There's hundreds of bills.
Well, I mean, there are, but those are kind of the big ones coming up, right?
You all know my position. We could just shut them down and I'm good.
It would. This year especially, it might be helpful. So that's what I have.
Okay. Councilman McComber?
I just was planning on coming in and asking that the entrance sign in the city on Redwood Road get addressed, because I don't know if somebody stole the solar panel or something, but it hasn't been on. And I really appreciate, as I was coming in today, and I was planning on doing that tonight, there was a city employee working on the sign. So I just wanted to thank you all for working on that and getting that lit, because it's one of the few things that actually says Saratoga Springs that you can see at night. So thanks.
Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, I just wanted to report on the service provider luncheon that we had on the 8th. And it was a good turnout. It was fun to meet. I was able to meet with the gentleman that works on Shea Park with the trains, and also a couple of our engineers that we hire a third party, and then also a community church leader that's here in Saratoga. And so yeah, it was a fun opportunity. I really appreciate the staff that put that together as well. And so just wanted, yeah.
Okay. Mark, do you have anything?
Yeah, if I could, real quickly. Laura, would you please stand up? Mayor and Council wanted to introduce you to Laura Gammon. She's our new Human Resource Director. She's been with us now for 42 days.
Wow.
Oh, you're keeping
It's either really good or really bad.
So anyway, we're thrilled to have Laura here. You know where HR is if you have any questions, and just thought we'd have her stick around and introduce. Do you have any questions for her specifically this evening?
No.
Thrilled to have her on the team, and really excited for what she's doing. So thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to the public hearing. Consideration of adopting amended parks, recreation, trails, and open space impact fees plan, an impact fee analysis, and impact fee ordinance 18-4.
Jeremy.
Mayor and council, we have been working on the parks impact fee for quite some time, first with Horrocks and then with Zions Bank. We had an open house, and we've brought to you tonight a impact fee facilities plan and impact fee analysis for your consideration for adoption. It is an increase, and just to go over in quick detail the way we've set it up, there's not like a template, like a state template that says this is how you do your impact fees. In general, we have to identify a level of service, and so what made sense for our city is we actually created level of service for each of our trail systems, urban, wilderness. We created a level of service for our new facility, Patriot Park. We're calling that a fields type facility. We created a level of service for our marina because that was a unique facility. And then we had a regional parks level of service. So in essence, we broke out the marina and Patriot Park as a separate level of service because we felt they were unique and couldn't be lumped in with the other regional parks. And that wasn't really apples to apples, and would have been a disservice to existing residents because that would have then potentially diluted, well, it would have raised the quality of the other pool because they're amenitized higher, it would have diluted them. So really what you have are individual levels of service. This impact fee allows us to not only get reimbursed for instance, the fields level of service, because that was a new one, and we've created capacity beyond the existing residents, and so new residents will have to reimburse the city for their proportionate share of that. We'll also, for the marina and for regional parks, ensure that future parks that we invest in are amenitized to an equivalent level of service. We did take into account the 21-acre property that we will get dedicated to us one day in Fox Hollow Performance Park, I think it's being called. However, we will need to essentially acquire an additional 39 acres. So our level of service requires that in the next 10 years, we'll have to add 60 acres of new regional parks. This doesn't take into account pocket parks or parks for local project open spaces, but for regional facilities that meet that standard, we'll need 60 new acres. We have 21 coming to us, so we'll need 39 more acres to buy the actual land, but we'll actually have to pay out of our pocket to improve all 60 acres. And so this ensures that we have the financing to do so. The other thing that's a little unique, and I think we've had some questions about it, is the level, because Patriot Park was funded through a sales tax bond, there's actually a credit owed that declines on a 20-year scale because it's a 20-year bond. So the impact fee without the credit is something like $3,500 per unit per ARU, but because that credit is substantially high now because you have 20 years of sales tax for someone coming in now, that's like an $800 offset. So this first year, I think the impact fee is $23.88 and then every year it'll go up a little bit because that credit decreases, because the resident in year 19 only is paying 19 years. And so obviously after 20 years, then that credit disappears completely, and then it'll eventually go to its base impact fee, which is around $3,500. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councilman Porter?
I had one, and I think you may have partially answered it indirectly anyway. Like I went on the website looking for the old Parks Impact Fee study from, guessing it was like 2010 or something like that. And it's been replaced by the draft of this, so I couldn't find it, so I couldn't compare them. But I just, my recollection is that we were at like 4.04 acres per 1,000 people. And now we're looking at, I think in the report it was like 2.29 or something like that. But I think because you broke out the different types, that may have account for some of that change. But I would like to see some sort of historical comparison on that, not necessarily before we approve this, but I just want to make sure we're not lowering our bar and that we're just, we really are just splitting it out and, we have a bushel of apples instead of just one big apple.
Yeah, great point. This is independent of the open space requirements in the Land Development Code.
Okay.
So developments will still have to meet the level of service based on the zoning they're in, which, requires 10%, 50%. And so that really will dictate in some ways if you want to look at the gross open space. What we wanted to do was look at only those facilities that we would classify as regional.
Right.
So staff did that based on only those facilities that really met a certain acreage and a certain amenity package.
Right.
Because again, we don't want to dilute. We could have a lot of acres, but if there's no amenities per acre, we can only require developers to improve or to fund the same level. So it's the ones, there's a map in there, but it's the ones you can think of: Shea Park, Neptune, Sunrise Meadows Park, the ones that typically have, and so that we went through that whole analysis in the impact fee analysis and said, these are the parks, here's the level of amenities, and we came up with a standard to say, okay, when we bring in new acreage and we're going to improve it to this level, it came up to be about $100,000 an acre is the cost to improve to that level.
Okay, and that's
we'll still have more open space beyond that, but those won't be regional. Those will be local.
And I get for the impact fee analysis, that's what we need to do. I get that. I'm just saying, maybe as a side note, I'd be interested to see, even including, like we have a lot of HOAs that have private parks. I'd just be interested to make sure that as a city, we're seeing it kind of that we're staying at the same level of, because maybe I don't think this is the case, but it's possible that we're not requiring enough in the residential zones because, you know, we're seeing this steady decrease. I just want to make sure that 40 years from now, you know, we're not like, boy, I wish we'd built more parks, you know. So, because I mean, I've lived in cities where they've done that, and you don't buy houses and tear them down to build parks. Cities just don't do that.
I think the information you're looking for is probably in the Parks Master Plan that we did a while ago, but I'll find it for you and I'll email it to you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other?
Still have the public hearing as well.
Yes. Okay, we have the public hearing. Is anybody here for comment on this?
Hi, good evening, Mayor and council people. I'm Deanne Hewish with Utah Valley Home Builders Association, and I'm back. We did come to the open house that Jeremy and Mark had, and we appreciated that, getting an notice of it early, and we did come with some general contractors here. I just have a question, and I still don't know if it's been answered or not after I have gone through it was a draft that we saw, and there was a couple of changes, but not many, so it was still the same one. But when it comes down to there's a bond, of course, that was for the new Patriot bond, and so that's what's making this come down every year. We're also asking about on the main artillery roads where the developers are building. Right now there is a 30-foot easement that's required, and that's part of that goes to a trail. Is that included in the trails that would be for general use? Because those are open trails, and so that was our main question.
Yes. That's calculated in the trails portion of that.
And it was in there?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, I did not see that. That was just one of the things we were talking about is if, you know, the builders are going to be giving any kind of land swaps or the easements, that there should be a formula.
Okay, and we can certainly work on clarifying that, and for sure, in the past, we've always given open space credits in that regard, so the expectation would be that we would continue forward with that.
Okay, and we do believe as a organization that, yes, you don't want to have new development, there's not a park there, we understand that, it makes a good community, and no, you don't go back because the price of that, the equivalence of buying homes to tear down to make a park just isn't reasonable. We get that too. But we do want to know that, you know, whatever is contributed is given due credit for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here for the public hearing? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Is there any additional comments from the council?
I just had one. I mean, like other impact fees, we're never trying to make money, we're just trying to cover costs. And I know this one's a little bit unique, but what I liked about it is we're at least trying to make sure that we maintain the same level of service for existing residents. So essentially, at least, and Jeremy or Mark, tell me if I'm missing something, is that's really what we're attempting to do, is maintain the same level of service for existing residents. And if that's what we're trying to do, we're covering costs in that aspect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We say right now on our regional parks, we have so many acres improved, 1,000 residents. We want to make sure the city grows. We still provide that much per 1,000 residents, or, you know, however it breaks down. So we want to make sure that we're not trying to cram more residents in the same, using the same parks. We want to expand our parks so that the great amenities that our city gets now in the parks and the amount that's available to each resident continues to stay at the same level.
And part of that, you know, to your point is, you know, for example, half of the open space bond for Patriot Park, that's, you know, I believe it was half, I could be wrong on the exact percentage, but it's going to be used to, only 50% of that is going to be reimbursable through new growth and through new people coming into the community, because 50% of that is required by our residents. And so that is one of those examples where, you know, we're paying for that with sales tax bond, and then the other portion of it will be reimbursed to us over time, and that's why we're issuing the credit as part of that. But that's exactly to Councilmember Wilden's point.
And so I'm looking at, there was two different documents. One of them has Patriot Park. Right now they're saying will be 1.04 per thousand, and we'll go down to 0.52, which is maintaining an excessively high usage.
Yeah, basically what that means is Patriot Park that we're building today, phase 1 or whatever, can serve twice as many residents as we have currently. So we have enough So if our level of service half an acre and we now have 1 acre, we can double our population before we need to expand
And
the
we're
next
not,
phase.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And we're not trying to charge developers saying we want to maintain indefinitely 1.04. We're okay with 0.52. That's
Right,
kind
we've
of the
built,
structure
we've
we
built
set
more
up.
capacity than we currently need, knowing we can grow into that facility. But it's not to build out, it's just until basically we double our population. The way it works out is we'll need to, it's about 3 times that, right? So build out population is around 150,000 or 20. We'll need to triple the acres that we have now to that time frame.
That's just,
And that's
That's just for the
park.
field
Right.
type, and then you have a trail type and
That's
then
why we
regional
broke
park
that
type.
out as its own level of service. That's completely separate from the 60 acres of regional parks we have to improve,
Right.
separate from that.
Okay.
Councilman McComber?
So, I was looking through it, and I'll be honest, I got tired of trying to figure it out, so I'm just going to ask the question. Obviously, we know that the cost of building things is going way up. Our engineering estimates have come in much lower than what we've actually had to build on many of our projects. Was that taken into account here, or are you doing it just on 2017 data on value, or are you doing it on what, just what it cost us to build Neptune Park? What is it now, 7 years ago? 6 years ago? 6 years ago, and it was way cheap to build that park. Because to build Neptune Park again today would probably cost 30 to 40% more.
Right. Because in our regional park level of service, we said there's no more capacity, right? So we're saying we need, whatever we have as of today, we need to build that for regional parks. So what we did is we didn't look so much at what the parks we have cost. We looked at what the amenities they have, and then we said if we wanted to build those amenities now, what would it cost? So we didn't worry about what they cost because the developers aren't buying into that. We just want to say, to build that same level of standard, we have on average 8 park benches and 2 playgrounds and 4 pavilions. What would that cost to build that same level of quality per acreage now?
And who did we go to get that? Because we didn't put out a bid, I don't.
Right, we had a consultant, PEC, basically gave us a whole tab.
What the current rates are.
All the
Right.
little items and what they would cost.
Okay.
So we basically used the Patriot Park numbers to say
That's the
what's
most current
today's
we have.
cost numbers on these things, and then we use that as the foundation for that.
And what's the plan for revisiting this? Because it's been a while since we've done this, and
Frequently. Yeah, I mean, every 2, 3 years, especially when we do big projects that we feel may
affect this.
different from the analysis, we'll want to update that.
Like, I mean, a perfect example, if we build a, outdoor amphitheater, obviously we've now stepped up the level of quality of service in the city. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because costs are continually rising. I can't find anybody to come fix my flooded basement because everyone says they're too busy and the costs, and if I want them out, it's costing a fortune. So I just want to make sure that we're making sure that we actually can build these things to the level of service that we want to keep the
You
same.
bring up a good point, which is you or future councils can always choose to raise the level of service. So right now, it's a couple acres per 1,000 residents. If, we can't use impact fees to do that, but if you or a future council wanted to build more than 60 acres or wanted to expand the field facility at a faster rate, then you could redo your impact fee analysis with that new level of service and hold developers to the new level of service.
Based on our increased commitment
If
to
you
the city.
chose to increase the level of service with non-impact fee money.
Yep, okay, that's great, thank you.
Councilwoman Barch?
On the, I'm looking at the chart that shows the different community parks with their different items that they have as amenities in there, and I'm just kind of curious because I'm looking at this and it shows Harvest Hills Park has 2 pavilions and it has 1, and Neptune Park has 2 pavilions, but it actually has 1. We have a second one planned, so I'm just kind of wondering how this fit into the general plan.
That was vetted by the Parks Department, so I may have to double check, but that should be accurate. So I'm pretty confident that that table is accurate.
Have one yet. As far as I'm aware, there's not.
Or based on its square footage, it may have counted as 2 standard sizes, so.
That's what it was, because it's so big. I remember when we
Because they're so
approved
big.
it,
So-
big one was counting as 2 because it's so big.
That would be the same thing as.
Yeah, and we factored those things in, so that's the answer to your question.
I remember that when we.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Wow, everyone Everyone's jumping.
I move that we,
And I apologize for my staff report, it's ordinance 18-4.
oh, 18, okay.
One other,
Mine says XX on there.
one other
okay.
point
It's on your-
too, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
The ordinance actually should say that it's repealing and replacing the enactment language. Should say repealing and replacing that section.
Does it not say that in the ordinance?
No, it says amended as follows. It
Okay.
should say repeal and replace.
Repeal
That
and
was something that,
I got it.
that was input I gave to the individual that drafted it and didn't actually make it into the ordinance.
All right, I move that we adopt the amended Parks, Recreation, Trails, and Open Space Impact Fee Facilities Plan, Impact Fee Analysis, and Impact Fee Ordinance 18-4 dated today. Also amending the ordinance to say repeal and replace instead of amend for city attorneys.
Okay. I have a first from Councilman Porter. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Councilman Podeska. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Podeska?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, business items. Saratoga Springs Commercial Plat C, preliminary plat. Daniel Schmidt, WPI Enterprises is the applicant.
All right, thank you. For you tonight is a preliminary plat in preparation for a future site plan. The plat is an extension of the Saratoga Springs development, and the property is, it's not working, if you'll just do that for me, is zoned regional commercial. Next slide, Dave. So here to the north, to the very top, is Crossroads Boulevard, and then to the west of the proposed lot is Exchange Drive, just for orientation purposes. This is just a one-lot subdivision. And on February 8th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and voted to forward a positive recommendation, and staff recommends you approve this project to allow the Saratoga Springs development to continue to move forward. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
The applicant would like to come up in case there's any questions. Okay. Councilwoman Barch? Comber?
Nope.
Does anybody have?
Pretty straightforward. I wish I knew what was coming, but.
This was almost too easy. Don't.
Great.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve Saratoga Springs Commercial Plat C, preliminary plat, Daniel Schmidt, WPI Enterprises applicant at 1378 North Exchange Drive.
Okay, I have a first from
I'll second.
Councilwoman Barch, and I have a second from Councilman McComber. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Just that as soon as you're ready, we'd love to announce what's going to come.
Yeah, let
Let
us
us
know what's
know.
coming. We're excited. Because obviously it's something, because you wouldn't be doing all this work for nothing.
Perfect. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Pedeska?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, the Crossing Community Plan, Major Amendment, Village Plan 2, Thane Smith, SLR applicant, Redwood Road and Pioneer Crossing, Ordinance 18-5.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we have an application in to amend the Crossing Community Plan. Along with that will also be a new Village Plan 2. This would take effect for the property directly west of the existing Smith, so it'd be developing this area you see back here between Market and Pioneer. You can see that the phases that are proposed right now, Phase 1 is for the most part, it's nearing completion. There's construction now going on in the corner. The village plan that you'll look at tonight is for Phase 2, and then Phase 3 will be in the future. Basically, the summary of what they're proposing would be to amend the community plan, would have the new village plan 2. One of the big things for discussion tonight will be the addition of requesting 2 LED message center signs to advertise businesses there. They are requesting the addition of auto-related uses as permitted uses. Those uses right now are conditional in the RC zone, which is what the community plan references, that it will follow those uses. Additional building height, and then extended hours of parking lot and building lights. And those are the main things of what they're requesting to change. And of course, the development standards are governed by the DAP, the community plan, and whatever village plan is approved. And so with that, turn it over to the City Council. Any questions?
Okay, Councilman Podeska?
That's a fun one to go first on.
Yeah, no, I actually,
He actually requested.
I wanted to go first on this. So I just wanted to go through just a few of the items, easier ones first. I'm good with the amendments proposed in regards to the uses in the RC zone. The only ones I have questions on just having the CUP on them is the automobile repair and sales. But the rest, I didn't see why they needed to have another 2 month added to their application to just get it approved through this level. I'm good with updating the height max to 125 in that for that community plan. And the removal of the requirement of pedestrian walkways for those parking stalls that are parallel to the building. I thought that was reasonable request there. Onto the village plan, I do like the updated exteriors that they've done, breaking up the sides and the back, so doing those requests. The request to have the lighting on after 11 o'clock was it 1 hour after closing?
Right.
Okay. I thought that was, for needs of security and so forth, that seemed reasonable for an entertainment facility. Just as long as the lights are still, in the design or facing down for our dark sky ordinance. And then, let's see. So onto the LED lighting signs. One of the reasons why I wanted to go first on this is for part of my career, I work in the film industry. Associate producer for a reality TV show, and studied film and worked in the industry for over 20 years. And for this type of industry, LED signs are crucial. It's a very visual medium. I mean, they carry the name motion pictures for a reason, and that's what everybody connects with a quick image. One thing that I really have appreciated their request with these LED signs is that it's not for videos, it's for still static images that rotate on 8 seconds. I'm fine if it's longer, nothing less than 8 seconds. And but it's something that will bring in, help support their business. And I think as a city, we're all excited about having entertainment come into our city. And we need to understand that comes with things that we're not used to in our city as well. What I like about this is that this is a community plan, so it's all enclosed in that community plan, and it's not opening the floodgates to turning this into a Vegas or Traverse Mountain or Vineyard. As far as the size of the signs, I really appreciate them requesting half the size on Redwood Road and not having the full-size sign there. I did take a trip down to the shops at River Woods. They have LED signs down there, and those ones are 3 to 4 times bigger than what Fat Cats is requesting. Theirs is about 10 foot by 20 foot. They have 2 on each corner there. And still, those rotate at 8-second intervals, and it wasn't that distracting, given it was during the daytime. And another thing I appreciate them willing to do is to turn down the brightness of these signs during the nighttime, as another benefit there. And let's see. To address some of the concerns that I've heard from here in the city as well as residents, these signs aren't even close to something that's similar to Traverse Mountain. They're definitely not as tall. These are 20-foot tall signs. They're dimmed at light at nighttime. Future commercial buildings on the west side will help buffer from this commercial district into residential. And And I think as we look at, as a city council, look at commercial districts, we need to understand that are we going to be a residential city that we go to Eagle Mountain or Lehigh for our commercial? Or are we going to allow commercial to come in as every other city is allowing in? So of course we do need to be careful in how much lighting is allowed, and I think that's where these community plans are perfect to address these situations. One thing as a contrast to point out is that in Patriot Park we have approved 70 to 80 foot lights, and that was because Patriot Park, to make it successful, had to come with that kind of lighting. And those bank lights are about the same size as these signs, but there's going to be, I think there's about 20 or more in Patriot Park, and those are closer to residential areas and much brighter. And it didn't seem like there was any issues with bringing those lights in because of the nature of the industry. And so with the nature of the movie industry, again, having those visual images that people connect to, it's similar to social media in the standpoint that how many posts are viewed when it's just text as opposed to those that are static images. And so that's something that the audiences connect with and brings in business. As far as driving distractions, again, with my visit down to the shops at Riverwoods, they were advertising numerous businesses. These ones are just pertaining to the business that has the sign. And having those 8-second intervals or more wasn't distracting, and I was even looking for it, not just being a bystander. The driving distractions I see more often are those trying to watch the movie in the van in front of them than a sign on the side of the road. And so again, I haven't heard of any sort of mass carnage or accidents happening because of static LED signs. And so I would just be in favor and encourage the rest of the council as well.
Okay. Councilman McComber.
Can we go back to the list, please? Yeah, that's probably the best one. So first off, I agree 100%, Councilman Podesta, that we need to be, we have to have the ability to adapt to change. Obviously, we've been wanting entertainment type businesses in our city for quite a long time, and now that they're finally coming, we need to adapt accordingly. I will say when I first saw this, just because it was maybe, I don't even want to call it a knee-jerk reaction, it was just something that I was adamant about for many, many years here in Saratoga Springs, that we didn't want LED or flashing signs or like the ticker tape signs and things like that. It just becomes messy, and it's not the kind of environment that I think people who moved to Saratoga Springs wanted. I will say that there's probably a very large portion of people in Saratoga Springs who would be okay with no commercial in Saratoga Springs. If you see Facebook, there's quite a few people who wouldn't want to see any big box or anything. They don't mind driving. They really want it to be a better community. I don't believe that is the vision of Saratoga Springs as a whole. The majority, I do think they want to see business park. They want to have places to work, live, play, all that in Saratoga Springs. So that being said, I just have a couple things in terms of the pedestrian walkways in the parking lot. I'm very hesitantly okay with that. The reason why is because I don't think it's fair to punish the Fat Cats development for the failure of the district area plan. And I want to make sure that the owners of the district area plan who are not here get this message. Again, they were here the other day when I said it, and I'm saying it again. We like to include in our packets this beautiful district area plan every time, that they completely ignore all of the walkability, all of the community gathering places within these developments, and they're turning them into little strip malls without any place to gather. I will say that future phases, community plans, are going to really get a lot more scrutiny from me in the future. I'm completely irritated and frustrated that I believe that we were sold one thing and we're getting another. That being said, I don't believe it's fair for fat cats to have to carry that whole burden. I do appreciate the roundabout that they're putting in. I wish it could be a little bit bigger. And I would be curious what kind of feature is going to be in the roundabout. Is it just some trees, or is it going to have a water feature? Is it going to have something that gives it some dynamism? Because when you guys even came for the plan for this whole area with Smith's Marketplace, when I was getting the plans from the landowner, there were like multiple features. Go look at our other developments. And so we have a lot of really cool features that make it appealing to when you're coming there and you're walking in and out of businesses versus just parking lot, building, parking lot, leave, parking lot into another business. So I would hope that we're going to do something cool there. You've done some nice things with other roundabouts in the developments, and so I'm hoping that we'll see something fun there. In terms of the, I'll come back to the signage. I don't mind the lot breakdown, the structure height. I'm interested why, because I don't believe the theater is 125 feet. So what's the purpose? Why is it the request? Are they planning on building something that I'm not aware of?
And the developer, if you want to invite the developer, they can answer that too. My guess is right now they can go to, the theater was can go to 60 right now. Normal building's 50. An office right now can go to 100.
Yep.
I think they're just trying to coincide with the projects in the area that are going to 125. There's that area 3, that would be Village Plan 3. Don't know what's proposed to go there yet. Perhaps they're anticipating something that will be that tall in that area. Yeah, obviously the theater and the other buildings that are most likely going to go in Village Plan 2 on the periphery are not going to be 125 feet. I think they're just planning for the future for that last phase over there.
It just makes me nervous because I don't know what you're going to make at 125 feet, because not all 125 feet are created equal. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the council what their thoughts are on that. I'd rather see what the product is going to be and then make a decision to go to 125 feet versus just giving a blank check. I've never liked giving blank checks, and I'm not going to start now. And then approval possibility, the planning director to approve minor changes. I'm always nervous about doing this because how do we define minor? And that we've had this conversation at the retreat, et cetera. I'm okay with it here, but I'm always nervous about this because we as a council look at things differently. That's why we were elected. We're residents. We look at it from a residential point of view, not from a financial or a city point of view. Okay, so now the signage. So I was not a fan of having these, but then as I did my own research as well, I have come to, I hope, a good compromise. I was disappointed to see that they do want two, one on Redwood and one on Pioneer Crossing, but it makes sense with the amount of traffic that comes through this. I happen to be by the river woods every Monday and Wednesday for like an hour and a half every week because my kids are on the BYU Ballroom Dance team and where they practice are right around there. And I will drop them off and then I will go and frequent many of the businesses in the area. And one thing that I want to have the time, and I appreciate your willingness to have the time transition to be longer. One of the things that frustrated me is I'm sitting at the light and I didn't get to go through the green light, and I sat there for 40 seconds because the person in front of me was reading each change, and I could actually watch them reading it, and they didn't realize the light turned green. Didn't cause an accident. I didn't hit them, though I felt very strongly to do so. But they were reading all of the different things because like promotions, discounts, sales, they were just reading them. And when I honked, they didn't even think it was I was honking at them. They must have thought somebody else was honking. And then when I really laid into it, they gave me a pretty finger and then drove on because they were imbeciles, but that's okay. Yeah, and so that's my real concern is the changing. I would be in favor, and I did some research online and things, and just with our light frequency, et cetera, other than our peak travel time, I would love to see a 20-second change. And really the top movies is only 2 or 3 top movies, and that's at the peak season, Christmas, 4th of July, when you have 3 blockbusters hitting at the same time, because that's really what they're trying to hit on is, because Pacific Rim is not a blockbuster right now, but Jumanji still is. Black Panther probably would be the better one to have. But I'm just joking. But if it's at a 20-second interval, then most people will actually see the sign, get the advertisement, know the good movie's out, and then be able to move on, and then they can advertise another movie, and they're not sitting there waiting for the change. I am going to steal, just so that I don't have to come back and speak to it, but Shelley has a concern that I would agree with, and it's the sign size. And so I'm looking at this as like any other sign, because it's static, which I too appreciate, because they could have come and asked if we wanted little video clips, and that would have been a whole nother level of anxiety. But really, if it's a static sign, then really it is exactly that, a sign, right? And so in the zone, it's required that it stays at, the maximum sign could be 50 square feet. Am I correct? That's what we were talking about? So I would like to see these stay at 50 square feet. I get that the big signs down at Riverwoods, again, it reminds me to scale. It's almost the same scale as the Traverse Mountain, if you look at proximity and closeness versus freeway versus a road. And so it's completely overwhelming. And I don't know if you know that many people on the Provo City Council were kicked out of office because of that, because there's a lot of money in the Riverwood lot. So I'm not saying that it's a political thing, we should make things all based on a political decision, but that decision cost 3 people their seats. Because of how big those signs were. I have a friend down on the city council in Provo, and was telling me that that was one of the main reasons that they had problems with the re-election. So if we keep it consistent, then we don't have other businesses saying, well, I want a 50 square foot sign on the back of my building. Because then the haircut, Supercut says, well, I want a 50 square foot sign. And then the Costa Vida says, well, I want a 50 square foot sign. And technically, it's not LED, but we're now saying that we think that signs can be bigger than 50 square feet. So if we could keep it to 50 square feet, that would be great. And then also as high up as possible to avoid vandalism, because as pretty as that picture looks, because that movie was awesome, Jumanji, it's not going to look as good if it just says Juma. And NJI is broken because kids can reach it and punch it really easily. If they have to come with a stool or ladder, it makes it less. But 7 feet, I'm fat and old, and I can jump, and I could probably clear that eye, the top of that eye, easy. And I'm seriously gained a lot of weight in my older years. But so that would be my thing, as much as we can get them as high as possible, keep them at 50 square feet and have them at 20-second intervals, then with great reservation, I would be okay with those signs. Now, the problem with this is we got slammed in here with Les Schwab at the same time, which I don't appreciate, because we're looking at making changes to the community plan, and then all of a sudden I get a building that wants to come in, and I almost think that it was, I'm not saying done on purpose or anything, because I think it's done out of expediency to try and get things done, but this building does not even come close to meeting any kind of standard that I would say meet the vision and plan for the crossing. One of the things that we have as a rule is that buildings have to, in that same plan, have to match relatively the same. This is all cinder block. It doesn't match any of the other smaller buildings in the area. Other businesses like Quick Quack Car Wash were very accommodating to our requests, and I sure as hope that the Les Schwab will do the same thing. I will say I appreciate the four-sided attempt on architecture. I would like to see the backside be a little bit more. The reason why is it backs on Pioneer Crossing, one of the busiest roads in, and will become even busier as Mountain View Quarter comes in. That to me is almost as bad as the Old Smiths. the backside. I would really like to see something with some more depth changing to really create a more appealing look. And I'm sorry, I think I will make Tires Les Schwab will have more success as a business if the back of their building doesn't look like that. And I know they're not going to be happy because it might increase their cost at the beginning, but I know they will have more business because I know the people of Saratoga Springs. If it looks like an office warehouse building, like that does, they're not going to get the type of business that they're hoping to get. So I want to make sure that as we go through this, that we have some serious conversation. Just a point, changing the color of cinder block does not break up, in my mind, the surface, the elevation. Just changing the color of some stone. I can throw some paint and make it do the same thing. That to me is not breaking up, and that does not meet the purpose of the code, as well as the multiple uses of materials and then matching the other materials in the area. With that being said, I appreciate what Fat Cats did in having the roof change its elevation. See, they are playing a little bit with colors of stone, but they've done some things where and I appreciate, I think Mark Christensen, it was your recommendation to have that pop on the back so it actually drops, and so you actually see your eye gets broken as it goes along the back. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I was just observing what they did. I have no architectural
But I think you were, when I was in the meeting, because they had it with the color, and then you said if we could have some change in elevation, that would help a lot. And that to me, it does, and does do a lot. And then in terms of my last thing, because there was a lot of changes in this, the lighting. I absolutely have no problem with the lighting. I do appreciate that the lighting gets turned off. Other than the security lighting, there should be some lighting on the exterior of the building. I hope they're not planning on turning all their lights off. They're just, if you can go to the picture that shows all the green lights, that'll help people understand why we keep saying the lighting. Do you have that one in there?
I can bring it up in the plan here.
So those of you who are like, what are you talking about lighting? Is it like what, coach lights? No, wait till you see how they want to light this sucker. So, again, to your point, with the other buildings in the area, other commercial that will be coming, this will be internalized within the development, and those lights will not be flooding into other parts of the region. So there you go. So you can see all the green lighting, that they can change those colors for seasons. Valentine's, it can be red, different things, 4th of July. Just don't go red, white, blue flashing, or else you'll be getting a call. And then, so, okay, the last thing, I'm sorry, I had one other thing. On the monument signs, if they have Fat Cats on the top, they can never have Fat Cats on the screen, because then they've just doubled their logo on the monument sign.
Yeah, and Kevin could probably back me up. One thing about that's regulating content. And we can't regulate content.
But can we regulate how many signs people have?
You can regulate numbers of signs, sure.
But they can only have one on the monument, correct?
That would be regulating. Kevin's going to have to jump in here.
Because then all of a sudden they could have Fat Cats on top, and then the whole screen can say Fat Cats. Now and all of a sudden, you see how they just went from 50 square feet to 150 square feet?
Yeah.
You see my concern?
Well, yeah, we can address, like David mentioned.
We can't address content, but I can address how many signs, sign size. I can restrict size, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can probably do it with size, because if they have both spaces, then they've now exceeded the size that they're allowed. So I just don't want, again, it's games. I've seen it happen before, and we'll see it happen again. But again, I appreciate all of the efforts from staff and the developers to try and make this work. Please, 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 the Les Schwab does not work. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councilwoman Barch.
Okay. I will try to get through all of these. Can you go through the conditional uses really quickly?
I hope you do. We got
4.5 hours.
Yeah, well, it's not that, it's just, yeah, and a lot of it I can. It's just a matter of making sure that I actually got everything covered, because, so, just for staff, I don't know how this particular section of our packet got put together differently than normal, but it is not a flat PDF, and it is so slow to bring up. And when I go to try to make a comment on it and put a little comment mark on there for my packet on my PDF reader, then it actually tries to pop up and move their text and enter, yeah. So it's
a layered PDF.
It's a layered PDF instead of a flat PDF. So if we can make sure that doesn't happen again, so it doesn't take me 4 years to go through a section.
You know what,
it'd be
thank you for
awesome.
that feedback. What we did was we actually, from the PDF that we got from the applicant, we
Yeah.
were trying to show where the changes were. And so we added a layer in that regard, and that's probably what
triggered it, yeah.
But again, we were trying to narrow down the red line.
Which was helpful, although I had to rearrange my brain to make sure that red was not the change, black was the change instead. But, you know, it worked. So that was good, but if we can somehow flatten it afterward, that would be great. Thanks, just for future. Okay, so on the changes on, not that, on the actual use changes, Dave?
On the second line there?
Yeah, oh yeah, they are all there, okay, thanks.
And the applicant just pointed out, they, in the planning commission, they voluntarily take out equipment sales and service, that's why that's struck out. The
Okay,
applicant
that's
has
fantastic.
removed that.
So, I mean, some of them I don't mind, movie theaters, bowling alleys, arcades, I don't mind fast food convenience store combinations, whatever. I can go with that if that's what the rest of the council wants to do. I have serious reservations about making auto repair, auto sales, tire sales permitted.
Yep,
The reason is, one of the things that we absolutely do not allow in our city is for tire centers to decorate their lot with tires. They think it's really pretty. Most of us think it's really not.
They think it's money.
Yeah, because they look at it and it, you know, is the money for them, whatever. They have plenty of advertising without having to have tires sitting out on the berms and the landscaped areas and everything else. So I cannot, that's one of the things that we can do as we are having a conditional use, is we can say no tires displayed outside. In addition, if this were a permitted use, then they would go and say, hey, look at our, you know, CMU block everywhere, and there's nothing we could do about it. So this is one of those things, absolutely positively not. I am not okay with that being a permitted use. It needs to be a conditional use. I can't, that's the one I personally can't give up, so. As far as, I'll go to Les Schwab really quickly. Councilman McComber covered all of that. This is, its elevations are rather lacking compared to the rest of the development, and it's very, very disappointing. They need to be just like all of the other non-big box stores and have those same architectural standards and details with the stucco and the metal and the cast concrete and all of the varied architectural details that make this project look really nice. Les Schwab is sorely lacking in that. That being said, I also had some concerns about the four-sided architecture, especially on the backs, as that will be facing Pioneer Crossing. That really needs to be amped up. Other than that, Councilman McComber covered all of that. As far as one of the things that I had asked during our work session was about the landscaping along Pioneer Crossing and the landscaping in the islands, and I don't see that any of that changed at all, Dave.
I was typing something, what was that?
That's okay, sorry. One of the things I asked during the work session was about the landscaping along Pioneer Crossing, the trees, and also the landscaping along within the parking islands, and I don't see that changed at all.
The landscaping display, or the cross-section is the same that's already has been approved, they're just extending that through what's already there now.
We have landscaping throughout the parking islands.
Right.
In the rest of the development, and they had come in and they had no trees in the parking islands.
You mean on the graphic that they were showing?
Not just on the graphic they were showing, but like within the actual where they're going to plant trees. They're talking about shrubs and they're talking about bushes, but they weren't talking about trees.
Okay.
And then along Pioneer Crossing, we talked about the fact that they've got nothing but rock, plain rock, on the outside at Pioneer Crossing.
Yeah, and now I'll go to it here. This is what they've got for the landscaping. And we can obviously put in details And they're talking shrub area here within the parking areas, these,
Right,
that
so
color.
again, no trees whatsoever.
Right.
One of the whole purposes of having trees in the parking islands is to mitigate that heat, to
Right,
give
and-
some canopy.
And I'm
shade
sure
the
they'd
parking
probably, I'm
areas.
sure willing to do that, we can add that.
So we need to add that, which is what I asked for at work session.
As far as the cross-section,
It just needs to be consistent with everything else,
it should be
exactly.
in that should be in this one. Come on.
Yeah.
That's not behaving now.
That's exactly.
It's going to be in the other plan. Let me pull that up.
So while he's pulling that up, you're just looking for trees consistent with what they've done in the rest of their community plan?
Basically, don't change it.
Don't change it, yeah.
Yeah, because what you got here, now this is the approved cross-sections already in the community plan, where it talks about, if I can read that, I mean, it's all rock in through here right now. That's already what's in there.
It's not red, it's black. Sorry, this is one of those problems I have because it's switched.
Yeah.
To me, that says it's a change because you guys told us the black.
Yeah, in the community plan, the changes they did were just these little clouds right there. And so, yeah, there's some confusion and yeah.
So that's something that realistically, that whole side of crossing, that is the south side of the sidewalk, and the west side of the sidewalk, which means that's where the shade is. I have any tree on that side of the sidewalk is so uncomfortable for pedestrians. So uncomfortable. And that's something that I asked for during the work.
Okay.
Still like to see that. Okay, so speaking of pedestrians, throughout the plan, both in the all of the sections of this village plan, you have a lack of pedestrian pathways from the outer sidewalks into your development. So often you'll see only a pedestrian, be it future or going. I just realized my microphone was off, sorry. Sorry. I know. Well, Kayla's going, I can't hear. Okay, good. So sorry about that. So one of the things that I noticed is that as you're looking at exactly that illustration there, on the roadways, you're only showing a pedestrian access point on one side or the other of a road. That's very, very problematic. You're forcing people to cross roads where they don't need to cross roads, or forcing them to walk in the road or on the edge of the curb. So we need to make sure we have pedestrian access points on both sides of those roads coming in. And then as you look at the actual pad sites, if you can just pull any of those next
If I
pad
can add
sites
too,
up.
and they're planning on putting multifamily housing in this area to support these developments. There's going to be a lot more walking.
So again, here, as you're looking at this, there's no real way to get from the sidewalk over to the actual restaurant or store. So again, we need to make sure that the dine-in restaurant has one coming down, but the drive-through restaurant, the fast food restaurant there, has no ability to actually access the store. So
Yeah, we did bring this up with the applicant about this not having sidewalks on both sides. We'll just let the applicant address why they've designed it or proposed it in this way.
if you'd like to address that.
My name?
Yes, please, for the record.
Scott Verheeren with Boyer Company. I'll try to address it as, I guess, as easily as I can. The thought is, on these pedestrian walkways right now, we'd like to funnel people to a certain point. And the intent is on those pad sites right there to get them to a point, and you can see where they cross, for instance, the right in, right out off of Pioneer Crossing to come in. We don't want people crossing everywhere across that roadway.
If they're coming from the other direction, then they have to go across the road and then come down.
I'm not sure
So if you're coming from the west, for example, from Market Street, you're walking down the sidewalk that direction, they're going to have to cross the street before they can come into the development. So you're thinking very unidirectional. You're not thinking about coming from the other direction.
Well, and I may be misunderstanding, I apologize for that, but the intent is to get people into those pad sites and then ultimately funneled through the pad sites in some fashion back into the pedestrian walkway to get them over into the Fat Cats area. I think that's what you're talking about.
To get them to any of the pad sites. If I'm looking at, let's look at the lot that is just north of that right in, right out off of Pioneer Crossing. If I'm coming from that west sidewalk and I'm coming down that sidewalk, and then I have to now cross over that drive area, then come down the sidewalk and then cross back in to get to the other areas. It's just, it doesn't make sense to not have sidewalk on both sides. I've got it.
No, I don't disagree with that. I thought you meant every single pad site in there, and the intent is that we don't.
No, I don't expect you to walk between pad sites necessarily.
Right, okay,
and I do appreciate the pedestrian connection directly from the sidewalk if they're paying attention to the buildings. I think that's great for those future pedestrian connections. I'm just talking about along those streets, we really need to have sidewalks on both sides.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, so if we could add that to those exhibits, that would be fantastic. So I see that in 3 places just on this exhibit alone. Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Also, a question on the fire lanes, and Chief, this may be a little bit for you also. What is our normal fire lane width? And here they're asking for 20 feet instead of 26 feet. Are you concerned about that? That makes me nervous.
There would be some consideration on Sunday too.
Oh. So, is there a particular
Well, I'm just looking at
spot
this, that's one of the things that we've done is we're making sure that our right-of-ways are wide enough to be able to get our fire trucks through.
Right.
And I don't expect to have cars parked necessarily on those drive aisles, but when there's a really great movie, people park everywhere, not in parking lots, not in parking stalls. So that being said, it makes me nervous that they want to neck this down to 20 feet, and possibly, especially along the front area there where you've actually got parking that's got to back out and maneuver. So that makes just, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that.
It becomes a challenge, and one of the things that we will be addressing in the near future is a larger apparatus, and that of being a ladder truck, which is going to require more space, which will service this building. So whether it be ours or one from a mutual aid community, that's part of the reason why we've moved to the 26-foot.
So that being said then, as our fire chief, with them proposing 20-foot here instead, that's something that you're not comfortable with?
Correct. If that's what you're alluding to.
That's what I'm asking for.
That's what I'm giving you.
Okay.
But can I ask a clarifying question? That's 26 feet for roadways. This is an internal parking lot. I mean, so I mean, this is not necessarily a typical road width.
So I guess what I'm considering, so the road coming in to the roundabout and moving around that would all have to be the 26 feet. On the inside, the parking lot, angles are going to become very critical as far as the design of planters, curbs, those kind of things. We have to make sure that the right diameter and circumference on curbs and things like that will allow for large apparatus to turn. And I think the best way to address that is to have them provide an exhibit, a fire apparatus exhibit.
So they have one in here. Have you not seen it?
I have not seen that.
That's
the 26, they're asking for 20 on that outer.
Dave, can you pull up that exhibit? The fire lanes exhibit?
Does it actually have an apparatus in it?
No.
That's what I'm saying, is we can
Yeah.
have them provide an example.
I think it's back where you were in that section, but I'm not.
It's page 14 in the village plan.
Thank you.
And I guess to clarify, when you asked, had I seen it, I was thinking that they had provided a.
So this is what they've given us.
Parking example. So what I'm saying is they would need to provide an exhibit of the 48-foot length apparatus moving through all of those drive aisles and making those turns. Because there is a significant amount of bumper swing that is going to have to occur, especially with the dual axle on the rear, so.
Okay, so for me then, until Chief sees that exhibit and knows how those apparatus are going to be able to get through there, I'm not comfortable decreasing from 26 to 20 foot on those fire lanes.
I do think if you look on there, and the chief could comment on this better than I could, but you see the dotted lines at the corners there, and if you look under the legend, there's a radius showing a 52-foot radius, which is the bigger one, and the smaller one being a 28. And I think, Chief, you would know far better than I would, but I think the intent there was to show how fire trucks and fire equipment would get through those corners in particular.
Right, and I see the on the legend, I see the 52 feet on the grade area. However, I don't know if that is the same on the interior, based on what I'm seeing. So again, I think providing that driving example with an apparatus, we've asked other developments to provide that and in the past, and so it's not anything unusual.
So on that, I would suggest perhaps then as part of our motion that we make sure that Chief signs off on whatever the fire lane width is.
And generally, I think that's part of the general.
I'm just concerned because here we're approving a community plan and village plan. They're calling it out specifically, which almost overrides our our normal process.
Understood.
So I want to make sure we call that out. Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Okay.
On the signs in general, I have concern on the number of signs laid out across all the monument signs and the shared monument signs and it's a lot. So normally when we have a shared monument sign, and this doesn't call out the difference between a monument sign and a shared monument sign, it just says monument sign. So my concern is we don't, generally we say at least 200 feet between a shared monument sign and another monument sign of any sort. And we've got 100 feet in one area, we've got 160 feet in another area, so some are close, but they're not quite there. That's a huge proliferation of signs. That's kind of the purpose of the shared monument signs. Yeah, and especially where you've already also got your large pylon signs on top of that, it's just really excessive. So I think that we need to take it down, Scott, and go from, a minimum of 200 feet between, for example, that big pylon sign and another sign, and look at some more shared monument signs, make sure they're shared, and not have quite such a proliferation of signs here.
Because this doesn't take away, they'll have signs on their buildings.
Plus they'll have signs on their buildings still.
If I may, the idea behind this is very similar to what we've done in phase one, and that is we don't know who the tenants will be on most of these pad sites, and so we very well may end up with something similar to what you see in phase one, where we have, as an example, Beans and Brew and the dentist and in that particular pad site, and that's where we'd have a shared monument sign.
Right.
Is there. So I will say as an aside, and I'll put it on public record, the Boyer Company is not a huge fan of signs, but as has been pointed out by some people tonight, we realize that in order for us to be competitive, we have to have signs. And so we try to keep them at a minimum, but at the same time, we realize that we need to have signage that will accommodate the various tenants that will be in here. So the challenge we have here is trying to anticipate who will come in. If we have a single user, then they will get one monument sign. If we have a building where there are several tenants in a building, similar to the one that I mentioned before, or the ones that we're building right now on the corner of Pioneer and Redwood, we'd like to have the ability to give those tenants a shared monument sign. It's very critical to them. I don't disagree. We do agree that we think building signage is great. Unfortunately, there has been yet to be one retailer that I know of who will pass up on the opportunity to have a panel and a monument sign out on the street.
Well, and if you don't give them a monument sign of some kind, then they just put up banners illegally and hang them off of their railing. And then our code enforcement doesn't do anything about it. So I get that. I do get that. I just am concerned that we have them so close together. So I would much rather see them spread out a little bit more. And I know you're trying to be flexible here, but the problem is we always have to look at what can be allowed. And honestly, if you had all of those lined up, it would be, you literally would just have this visual junk where you couldn't focus on anything. And so it actually negates the purpose of having signage, really. So I would like to see those kind of go back to our normal standards of the 200-foot minimum between those signs, just to spread them out and make that visually more pleasing, and also actually allow people going by to actually be able to see them versus just go, sign, and get hit in the face.
And one clarification is on the pylon sign. The 2 pylon signs that are anticipated there, one is solely for fat cats. The other one is anticipated for phase 3. So we will not offer that pylon sign. So this is the second one north of the right-in, right-out on Pioneer Crossing. That is intended to be used for a future tenant who would be in phase 3, or we've also offered that to Smiths as a possibility. But none of these smaller, and I don't mean by smaller to, none of the pad site tenants will be permitted to have a panel in any of these pylon signs.
Right,
So-
and I get that. It's not that. It's the actual proliferation of signs and signs and signs and signs. Not necessarily saying you're going to have the tenants have multiple signs. I'm just saying them because you're seeing so many of them.
Well, and I'll point out one thing and then I'll shut up. The pylon sign shown on there, and if you look at that, I believe that the distance shown on there from monument sign to pylon sign is 150 feet. So we've got 150 feet from monument to pylon, 150 feet to the next one. So the actual distance between the monument signs is greater than the 200 feet.
But you got a pylon in between there, which counts as a sign.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. But if we take away those monument signs, then that begins to be a problem. At least we haven't figured out yet how to solve that problem for the tenants who would like to have a monument sign out on Pioneer Crossing. Now,
And that's where it's shared, because obviously you have to go past both of, as you're coming from the east on that, you're going to hit the Les Schwab sign, and then you've got 2 different monument signs there. You have the ability to move the Fat Cat sign down slightly and just have one monument sign. It could be a shared monument sign for all of those, without having to have 2 monument signs and the pylon sign.
I'll agree to disagree with you. How's that?
That's fine. So that's I think you have far too many, and I would like to see that more consistent with our code. And that's the great thing, is we can disagree and it's okay.
Exactly.
So, I have a vote, though.
Yes, you do.
Can I bring up just something on that quick, Councilmember
Please.
Bart? Just, and whether good or bad, it's going to be for your decision, but I think what they're doing is they're mirroring what's approved right now in the plan. Let's see here. Nope, this is the wrong one. Well, you can go on, let me pull it up here.
Okay,
but
that'd be great, thanks.
I'll just show you the sign plan for the existing village plan.
Drink,
Village plan 1.
Okay. So a question for you, Scott, on the project identification signs. Why the 3 different sizes of signs? Why not, I get, varying it up a little bit, flipping the light with the dark or whatever, but why the 3 different sizes of signs?
And do you mean specifically the project identification sign? That sign is to be, I say identical, very similar to the one that we have on the corner of Pioneer and Redwood.
Yes.
And so just a project sign showing the crossing generally. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
Well, you have 3 options, and they're all different sizes by like 6 inches.
It's a great design idea by the people who came up with the signs.
I was just curious. It just seems strange to me to have.
I would have to say, like Mark, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a design guru. I don't know why 6 inches is different, but it's immaterial as far as we're concerned. We just want to have a project identification sign that is in large measure similar to what we already have.
Absolutely,
That's all
and I don't have a
there.
problem with that.
Okay.
That's fine. Not a problem at all. It was one of those.
I don't know either.
Okay. Okay.
Councilmember Bart, here's what I was looking for. Just, maybe this is wrong now that's been approved, but this is what's approved right now in Village Plan 1. They go down to 120, 150, 200. That's the spacing on the signs. So perhaps looking back now, that maybe that's too much now, but I think they're just kind of mirroring what's been approved in the past. That's what they're
I
presenting
see
for the
also several
new plan.
200s in there, though, spreading them out like our others.
Exactly.
So I would just, I'd rather have them spread out more. That's just me, so whatever. Okay, Lights after hours, I don't mind having the lights on for an hour after for safety as everybody's leaving the theater and the bowling alley. I think that's totally fine. I am more concerned on the actual pylon signs. So, pylon signs. I think that these digital signs, I will disagree greatly, and I realize that this is, you know, your area, and so you think that it's necessary, but I disagree. I know lots of areas that have no digital signs, and they do just fine, not just here in Utah, but other places around the country. I realize that's kind of the direction people are going. It's not the highest end look, and that's, again, goes back to what Councilman McComber was saying, in that we were sold one thing by the original landowner, and it has not been fulfilled. So, that being said, personally, I would rather disapprove this sign. However, I know that the rest of the council is going to approve this. So that being said, I think we need to be consistent in our signage. And I have great concern about making the one sign on Pioneer Crossing bigger than the 50 square feet for several reasons. I absolutely love the comments that Councilman McComber made about being able to jump up and reach the top of the eye, et cetera. But it's just a clearance issue. We don't allow for, we require trees to be trimmed up above 8 feet tall. We require, I mean, just your normal clearance as you're walking along. To not have that clearance, to only have 7 foot of clearance is very short. My 14-year-old can walk and hit that, and I realize she's still growing, but she is still growing. She's only 14, and she can just walk by and touch that. And that's not considering jumping. So that needs to be back up to the 50 square feet if we're going to do this. In addition, for consistency, we have a code requirement that requires that any changeable copy type sign, which technically this is how they're treating this, be 50% or less of the signage area. If you go up to 70 square feet, then this is more than 50% of the signage area, of the sign face area. So if you go back to the 50, then you meet that code as well. I would agree with Councilman McComber that it needs to be closer to 20 seconds change time for various reasons, some of which we've discussed in previous council meetings as far as lobbyist verbiage in other arenas. And I realize that we get the opportunity to do things a little bit differently here because we do have this additional zone, but nonetheless, things do set precedents. So I would go, if we're going to do this, for 20-second timing, and then also for the consistent 50 square foot of sign space. And, well, yeah, and I think if you do that, if you put it up, then that gives you about 10 foot of clearance instead of 7 foot clearance, if I calculated correctly. You can't dunk, okay. So then I did have a question for staff on the dimming. So our code, and maybe we need to revisit this a little bit on the light dimming. Right now, the way our code reads is that you are 3 candle foot above ambient light, and it's got a formula in there that is the square footage basically ends up to be how far away you measure that. So for example, if you have a 50 square foot sign, then you end up measuring basically 50 feet away from the sign, and that's where you have to have 3 candle foot or less.
I think it's actually 0.3 candle.
Okay, sorry, 0.3 candle feet, yes.
And I'm not a light expert either, so.
That's okay. I just forgot the decimal place.
Okay, we got a few of them on the council.
That's good.
So that being said, my concern is that and that's something we need to revisit in our regular sign code. That is a large distance away in which to measure. That crosses the majority of that roadway, which means that you're actually measuring for the people going the opposite direction. And you're not taking into consideration the blinding nature of that for the people actually coming toward the sign and getting closer to the sign. So I think that needs to be measured basically, and the pedestrians are going to be right there as well. I think that needs to be measured maybe at the edge of the roadway or something like that. So as we're looking at that, thank you for being willing to dim those lights. I think that that'll work out well. And then being willing to turn that off after close. That'll also help everybody know when you're closed. So those are my basic comments on those signs. I'm trying to think if there's, I know there are other things in here, and again, my thing is so slow that it's difficult to cycle through, so I'll just go there.
Okay, Councilman Porter.
All right. Can we go back to the list? Sorry. I'm fine with the 3 phases instead of 6 phases. The automobile repair and the automobile sales, does keeping those as conditional uses give you great heartburn?
No.
Okay. Well, if it doesn't bother you too much, then it doesn't bother me too much.
Makes you happy.
So, the update, the lot breakdown's fine. I had to kind of agree with Councilman McComber. I'm just, you know, you didn't come up to speak to it. Do you have any justification for the 125 foot? Why do you think you might need that in phase 3?
The justification is simply trying to respond to what we anticipate market needs may be. And some of that has been based on a couple of healthcare companies that we know are going to be close by. And it's pure speculation at this point, but it just may set up a site to have a use that would require that type of height. And so I understand the concern of Councilman McComber. We're not attempting to have a blank check. We realize we'd have to come back through the process to have anything approved, but it's just in anticipation of what may happen.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily have a great, I mean, because we just approved 125 or 150 feet, I think it was, for the IHC, which is just across the street from this. So I don't necessarily have specific heartburn. However, I do, as he said, not all 125 feet are created equal. I don't want to see a 125-foot apartment tower, which I think is probably what he was concerned about as well. So, I mean, if you're willing to limit it to commercial or office uses, I'm willing to go for it. But you know, that's where I don't want a, you know, Trump Tower built in town.
Yeah, the regional retail does not allow any residential, which is what this is in the DAP.
It would if it were
But they've been talking about
putting short-term hotel.
You've been talking about the possibility of putting residential in this area.
Yeah,
so
we have.
I don't. Is that?
Well, yeah.
Getting two different.
No, we don't have an anticipation right now. I mean, all we're focused on is phase 2. But yes, to answer your question directly, yes, we've talked about that because we've used it in other projects we've done. We see residential as a very important component of it. We haven't yet done a 125-foot tower. I don't know anybody who has, and I don't quite frankly see it happening first thing in Saratoga Springs.
I don't either.
Anyway, so
I mean, I agree with everything you said. However, I think that would ease some trepidation if we could just. I'm happy to say 120. You know, we've already got 60 feet for a theater, 100 feet for an office building. If we just change, you know, 125 feet for non-residential uses.
That doesn't cause me any that doesn't cause me any heartburn. If we needed a 125-foot residential tower, I think we'd all be
having a different conversation.
Yes, we would be. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate that. Adding the development approval process planning director. I don't have as much heartburn with that. I think, you know, I see what Councilman McComber is getting at is what is a minor change. I don't think that staff in the past has abused any discretion that we've given them. So I'm willing to trust them to make a call on that, whether it's minor. I mean, everything I've seen that you guys have done as minor changes have been.
Yeah, that section's already in the community plan.
Right. Picture the type of benches. That sounds good. And removing the requirement to have pedestrian. Okay, I'm fine with that. I agree with the point in that. I think you agreed that putting pedestrian access on both sides of the roads in is a good idea. So that brings us to the pylon signs. And you don't have any, I'm sorry, you're from Fat Cats, aren't you? Yes. Yeah.
He's the one that ought to answer the questions, not on the signs, not me.
The 22nd change, is that?
State his name.
Oh, sorry, can you please state your name for the
Good evening, Rob Friend with Fatcast Development.
All right. The 22nd that was suggested, I mean, I personally, you know, I think like the 10 seconds in Gilbert, I think honestly, the longer you make it, the more likely you are to have people sitting there saying, I think it's the next one, I'm going to wait and see if it flips over in time. So you may have people waiting longer.
I agree.
It's opposite then.
I mean, I've done
Research, you just doing a hypothetical.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, having done some video editing in my days, not nearly as extensively as Councilman Podesta by any means. You know, it always sounds like 20 seconds isn't very long, but like when you do a 7-second screenshot of something that's not moving, it's forever. When you actually sit down and watch it without audio, you're like, holy cows, when's this going to switch? So I get the...
Can I make a comment on that? Isn't it supposed to be a sign, though? It's not supposed to be a movie.
It's
supposed to be a sign.
Yes, and I'm saying switching from one image to another image, 7 seconds is a long time.
But you're not waiting, you're driving by.
All right, well, we can agree to disagree on that. As was stated previously, we have a number of experts on the council, so, including me. So, I'm okay with less than 20, but you know, if it will ease heartburn, are you okay with 20? Or does that seem like something that's going to be a deal breaker for you?
First of all, I appreciate all the concessions that have been made, and I understand this is a sensitive topic in the city, and a lot of these things, if not all of them, we're totally fine with, and we're willing to work with the city and the residents on that. The 20 seconds is quite extreme in our industry, and the reason is we want to see customers that are able to see a now showing plus a coming soon, and there have been a lot of studies in the industry that the 8 seconds didn't come from just willy-nilly. If you read the code of a lot of cities, there's a reason that there's 8 seconds in that code. So I'd be fine with something more than 8 seconds, but I think 20 seconds defeats the intent of what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, can you give me a number what's the highest number you're comfortable with?
We
put together I'm sorry?
We got an auctioneer now, too.
I know.
I have 15 once.
I'm trying to make this, you know, as, you know, palatable for as many people as possible.
Sure.
So.
Sure. No.
Well, if you want to go down that road, we might go with 10 seconds. So.
Yeah. No, we put together just a short video to show a 10-second transition. You know, a 12-second, 10 to 12 seconds would be reasonable for us to consider.
All right. The measurement, I think, you know, that it seems like when we came up with that was the industry standard. And so I don't know why we would deviate from the industry standard. Oh, the other one was the 50 square feet. I guess my personal take on this is, you know, when we brought the crossing and you brought the crossing to the city, the concept, it was to be the heart of our commercial district. Now we have a use that thousands of our residents have expressed a desire for. And you are bringing in a request for a sign which, quite frankly, is much smaller than many of your competitors. I took a brief, you know, internet stroll and looked at all of your competitors within a 25-mile range of our city. The only one I found that didn't have something similar to this was Town Cinemas in American Fork. I don't know if the council is aware of that one, but Pretty sure that's not what we're trying to bring to our city. It's one of those dollar theaters that looks like a dilapidated building. So I think we would like something nicer than that. So was Porter's Place, and that's fallen down too. Yeah. So I struggle with us continually saying we want to see this city grow. We want to see the city become a city that has commercial in it. I know that Councilman Comer's right. There are some residents who have expressed a desire to stay a bedroom community. I don't think that's the direction that best benefits the city. And if we're going to have uses, we need to allow them to compete. I don't see that inviting fat cats to our city and then hamstringing them from the get-go is the right way to go. 70 square feet, I can hear some of the reasoning behind, requiring it to be 50 square feet. However, 70 square feet is, I believe, a reasonable request, and as this is contained within the community plan, I feel like I can support it. I don't know that we'd be able to, because of the content regulations, I don't know that we could tell you what you can and can't put on there. However, I agree. If you're, willing to have some sort of language stating that, I don't know if, I didn't see it in there, but maybe it was in there, codifying how you said, the other stores aren't going to start using this sign, and it's only going to be the anchor store that kind of uses it.
Typically what we do, and it's a little bit different situation with Fat Cats, but we're pretty strict about what can go on signs and who can be in signs, and the intent with this particular sign is that it will only be used by Fat Cats, no other tenants, and that the static part of the sign, we call the static moving part of the sign, I guess, is only used for display or advertising of the movies within the theater itself, and we'll have an agreement between the developer, the Boyer Company, and Fat Cats. The sign can only be used for that purpose.
Okay.
And we also will not permit anybody within the project to advertise on it, and that especially means nobody outside the project is ever going to advertise on it.
Right.
So we'll have a separate agreement in place, private party agreement that controls content in essence.
Okay. And you guys can get away with that, whereas we can't as a government entity, so I appreciate that.
That being said, there are some things you want to make sure you do here, and that is restrict whatever the sign may be, that it be an on-premise sign, meaning that it has to pertain to use in the crossing, and then you should also restrict the number of these signs that you're allowing. Otherwise, any of these other signs could, in the future, be changed to that.
And you're just asking for one per village plan, correctly?
That's correct. That's correct, yeah, just the one sign.
Two.
Well, for this village plan, yes, one, but we're asking, we technically need to, pardon me? Yes, we're asking to amend the community plan to permit that on, two total is correct, but what we're asking to do is, I guess to be technical, is to amend the community plan to allow for the one in phase one, and is that right, Dave?
Right, because the one on Redwood, that's phase one.
Phase one, and then this is included in the phase two. So two, no.
You believe that the third one will serve the purpose of phase three, and it doesn't have the video board.
That's correct. I'll say as an aside, just as kind of a bigger picture, the thing that we're struggling with, I think generally in the development industry, is that we see most signage ultimately moving to this LED type signage, the monument signs, the pylon signs, and I don't know that anybody yet has a great answer as to how that's going to be addressed. It creates all kinds of problems for tenants, for retailers, and for us as developers. So to say that we would never ever come back in and ask for something different is not true. So
I'm not going to litigate future battles tonight.
I'm just telling you, I don't want to be strung out if we come back in 2 years and say you said you'd never do that, because I'm not saying that.
We'll deal with your request for two in the community plan tonight, and we'll let you decide what you want to do to yourself in the future. Okay, and the other one that was brought up, I guess, was the monument signs with the multiple, combining the, having them spread further apart. I think that the plan that you show as was shown by the planning director, is similar to what you're doing in phase 1. I have no problem with what you've done in phase 1. I think you've been properly restrained, and so you've earned a little bit of trust from me that you will be similarly restrained in phase 2. So I don't necessarily think we need to spread them out or force them to be combined. Especially because I see, if you have 2 of those pads that are multiple tenants, if you're combining those signs, you're going to have one of those pylon signs that, you're going to have something 20 feet tall with all these little limbs. So you're not going to have enough space to put all of the tenants, is the point I'm getting at. So, so I'm fine leaving it as is. So I think with that, I will end and pass the baton.
Okay, Councilwoman Barch.
By the way, I just want to tell you that I actually really like your directional sign that you've got next to the roundabout. I think that's a great way to focus people and say, hey, this is this direction, and it's going to look really nice. So I want to say thank you for that one. And then a question to staff on this storm drain detention. There's a note in there that says lot 200 will drain to its own regional facility, and then everybody else will drain into they're in charge of their own stormwater. And there is no note about what lot 200 is, other than that little comment. So there's no exhibit to say what lot 200 is. Nowhere on here do any of these lots have numbers.
I thought there was one that had them.
243.
I lied, there is a note, but it doesn't connect to the stormwater. On page...
Can you identify lot 200?
I hate the way this...
200 is...
Les Schwab.
Les Schwab.
That's
yeah,
what I
and
thought.
just quickly, and I know...
201 is Les Schwab according to... 200 is Fat Cats and 201 is Les Schwab according to the exhibit on page...
Something.
8. Oh my gosh, this is painful.
The plan is on the storm drain. I'll get to that. We still need to work through all the details on that, but the intent is similar to what we did with Smith's. There's going to be a stormwater detention system, most of which will occur east of Fat Cats, and so most of these lots will drain into that, and then ultimately into the overall system. We do have one lot, which is the lot 201, that will likely discharge into the current system down the road just to the south of Smith's, and into that overall detention system there.
So can you go to the storm drain exhibit then? And I can't, it won't move fast enough for me to get there, so. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing
please.
while you're looking that up. I just also wanted to reiterate something that Councilman McComber said, that if you could put something beautiful in that roundabout, that'd be great.
Statue of Wilden's been made available.
Someone's going to have to help us out with that, but we'll certainly consider.
It's a guaranteed vote from him.
Don't.
We'll consider that.
For those watching, I cannot be bought.
I just had to beat you
And
to
yet
the
he keeps
offer.
offering suggestions on how to buy him.
Yeah, that's why they put it there.
Did you find that exhibit? So it's on page, exhibit 12, is where it's the gradient and drainage note. It says storm drainage for lot 200 will be, and the surrounding dries will be collected and detained in a common detention system. All others will be responsible for the detaining stormwater individually, which is kind of the opposite of what you just said, Scott.
Well, so what we're doing, the water will drain from, the stormwater will come from the various lots and ultimately end up coming into the system which is east of Fat Cats. They will be required to detain on their individual lot to 0.12 CFS, which I think is standard. Gordon, is that correct?
It's per the master plan for the overall SLR development.
Okay, and I may be mistaken, but whatever it is, we're doing that, but it's detained.
Okay.
Usually by lot, and then it will go into the overall system and then ultimately connect down, likely on the north side of that roadway, which is on the north side of Smith's, and into the overall system. To tell you that we have every specific of that stormwater worked out, we don't. We're close, and our civil engineers are working with Gordon to get that all figured out, but it's one of the biggest challenges on the project, so we're not done yet.
Okay. I just want to make sure we were getting the, because there's no, on this exhibit, there's no lot definition, and so I was a little confused by that.
My biggest concern in this document is that we spell out the design criteria, and then as we go to the site plan, those criteria are implemented.
Okay. Councilman Wilden.
Well, the benefit of going last is I believe in equal opportunity. I agree emphatically with at least one thing every council member said, and I disagree with one thing. I don't know which one it is. As far as 125 foot, if you could go back to that slide, I don't have any concern with that because the IHC, we were talking about 7 stories versus 5. I think that's what we were talking about there. It already says 100 feet for an office building. Would you be concerned if we said 125 foot for an office building using the same verbiage that already exists there?
No.
Well,
So Chris, he's accomplishing it by just changing 100 to 125 feet for an office building and getting rid of the other one.
That's fine. That's kind of how it's structured anyway. Is that?
It is. I mean, it may, as long as that definition doesn't preclude, and by saying this, I don't have this at all, but like if we're a medical office building that might play off of one of the uses north of us, I wouldn't want the 125 office to preclude the ability to do, for instance, a medical office building.
No.
And I don't think your code does, but.
Yeah,
okay.
and I think the medical buildings at IHC, et cetera, fell within the classification of office space. So.
Yeah, that's fine.
Excuse me. So I don't have any concern with that. It sounds like you're fine with the removing the staff approval, or not staff approval, I'm sorry. Not allowing for auto repair, is that what we're talking about?
Auto sales, auto repair.
Keeping it as a conditional, that's, if you're okay with that, then that will keep other people happy. I think it is a good, and maybe it's already there in the condition, but just to make sure that the fire chief can get comfortable with what's in the community plan so it doesn't override other standards and things
Agreed.
like that. I think that's good practice. I do appreciate after our meeting you added a lot of four-sided architecture on the Fat Cats building, so I thought that was fabulous. Kind of looking at the different things. I'm trying not to regurgitate everything that's already been said. I did miss to say this, that thank you for coming to our city. I don't know that there's been any other business in the city when we've announced it on Facebook that there was broader excitement out there. I know I felt a little bad because my Facebook post didn't get as much traction as the mayor's by like 100,000 or something like that. It was kind of ridiculous. But there is not just our community, it's the communities around us are very excited for your development. And I'm saying that because I think this is really critical, making this successful, not just for you, but it'll make our city economically viable over the long term. We're not only fighting against other cities. In 2 years, we're going to be fighting against the state, which, you know, Mark Williams, sorry, I work with Mark Williams, Mark Christensen.
We're replacing you with a Williams.
I'll be whoever you want me to be.
He's the brother of Larry Williams, right?
But, I mean, the prison side, it won't be ready for new pads in 2 years, but they're probably, my guess, going to be solicited in 2 years. And so if we don't make our city viable for economic development now, we're going to lose out. And I realize some residents, and it is a good point, and some of my family lives here is that way. They don't want a lot of commercial development, but the reality is we're going to have homes come in regardless of the commercial development or not. And that means property taxes will go up because property taxes don't cover fire and police and et cetera. And so if we're not economically viable as a city, we're going to have problems. And I really see Fat Cats and the rest of the Boyer development as the, what's the right word, the cornerstone or whatever to really keep us economically viable over the long term. As far as the LED lights go, not lights, signs, I think in our condition I'm fine with it if we limit it to 2 total per the community plan. What are you requesting 70 foot for both signs or just 51?
Just the one on Pioneer Crossing.
Okay. I'm okay with the 70 because it's only 1 foot on each side, but I would suggest, and maybe we don't need to do this, but I think it would help with some comfort that we put a condition that there is only 1 sign in the entire community plan allowed for this size. It's
okay with the 7-foot clearance.
You guys can work that out. What? Well, I didn't, never mind. I'll just keep moving forward. So I'm fine with that 70-foot square foot. Want to make you guys successful. And if we limit it to 2 signs specifically in the condition, only 1 that size, meaning even if it's not a digital sign, say Costa Vida or whoever comes and asks for a bigger sign like that it's already laid out, we're only going to allow 1 sign in the entire community plan at that size. Does that make sense?
It does, and if it gives you any degree of comfort, we have in our development criteria that signage needs to meet certain standards, and staff may have that, but if it doesn't, we're happy to share that with you. It's in every one of our leases. It's in everything. If we sell a site, then there are certain criteria that they need to match, which would preclude anybody from doing a sign of that size on their building.
Okay. No, that sounds good. And I don't know, from what you're saying, maybe I interpret it wrong, as having that as a condition, it already aligns with what you do in your agreements and et cetera.
It does, but it also helps us tell tenants they can't do certain things, so that's helpful to us as well.
So it's helpful to everyone then. And there's been question on timing of the signs. 8, you said, what did you say was kind of your range, 10 to 12? You probably shouldn't have committed that. I would suggest let's go with 12, you know, kind of the higher end. If it makes you feel better, 11.5. You all right with 12? Is that going to work?
12 is reasonable.
Okay. So 12, and then the restrictions around the number that can accomplish this. Anything else that I need to address that there was various opinions on?
Pedestrian walkway.
For the parallel parking? I'm okay with that since it's just parallel parking. That's right by the building anyway. I don't think there's anything else controversial, so that's it, Mayor.
Okay. There's been a request by a few council members to break this into 3 motions tonight. 1 to cover the conditional use permit, 1 to cover the pylon LED sign, and 1 to cover everything else on the list. So to start with that, I will do the Heinz 57 motion. Everything else on the list first. I will entertain a motion.
I will move that we approve the Crossing Community Plan, Major Amendment Village Plan 2, with the exception of talking about the conditional uses and the pylon signs, with all staff findings and conditions. Also, directing staff to fix the pedestrian connectivity along the roads and also into the pad sites, to fix the fire lanes to be consistent with the needs of the fire apparatus according to our fire official, to keep the trees and make them consistent with in the parking islands, consistent with the rest of our code. Also to increase the height of the office use up to 125 feet to be consistent with what we've done in another community plan.
I'll second that.
I have a first from Councilwoman Barch, second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion from the council?
Yeah, is this also including the Les Schwab?
The Les Schwab is just and that is the site plan, yes, as far as the village plan goes, but that was just a concept as far as all of the CMU, is that correct?
We just gave it.
It is just a concept plan.
And it'll be conditional.
And it's conditional use still once we get the other part done.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. We'll do a roll call. Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Pedesca?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I will entertain a motion on the conditional uses.
I'll move that we approve the conditional use changes, keeping auto sales, auto repair, and tile sales as conditional uses.
I'll second that.
I have a first from Councilwoman Barch and a second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion from the council?
Yeah, I wanted to throw out equipment sales and services.
It's already part of the change.
Okay, so is that going to be a CUP as well?
Yeah. They struck that
Because they
before it
struck
came
it.
in. They chose to take that one. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that leaves full-service car wash, convenience store, fast food combination, entertainment centers, movie theaters, bowling alleys, and arcades as permitted uses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do a roll call. Councilman McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion on the LED pylon sign.
I'll move that we approve the LED signs, restricting the size to both at the 50-foot face, consistent with the sign on Redwood Road, that we allow for 2 in the community plan, to restrict it to 2 in the community plan, excuse me, and what? Oh, and decreasing or increasing, however you want to do that, the change copy to every 12 seconds. Is that what you said, 12 seconds?
Do you want a clearance on that too, the clearance of the cabinet?
Well, if we do 50 square foot, it'll be identical to the one on
There's
Redwood.
no way to specify that or
It
not,
already
okay.
takes the clearance issue out of it.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Barch, second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion on the motion?
Could I make a substitute motion?
Do you want?
I just think a point of order would be to take a vote on that
Okay.
now and then.
Who?
But I would suggest adding to that motion the distinction that this be an on-premise,
And that this be an on-premise only sign.
only a use within the crossing community plan.
Thank you, sorry.
I'll amend my second.
Okay, so I've amended first and second. Do a roll call. McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Nay.
Podeska.
Nay.
Barch.
Aye.
Porter.
Nay.
Motion fails 3-2. I will entertain another motion.
I move that we approve the pylon signs, restricting it to on-premise use, restricting the number to 2 in the community plan, with only one of those being allowed to be the 70 square feet, and setting the change time to 12 seconds.
Have a first from Councilman Porter.
I'll second.
Have a second from Councilman Wilden. Any further discussion on the motion?
Would you be willing to amend to make sure that the height
Clearance.
so they could shrink the top part of the sign and have their LED sign higher?
No.
Then I will do a roll call. Councilman McComber.
Nay.
Wilden.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Barch.
Nay.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Do you have any other questions for us? Okay.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it very much.
Okay. Okay, next on the agenda tonight is the proposed mountain bike park in the vicinity of the North Fire Station. Rick, I believe this is why you've been hanging out with us all night? Okay.
Rick is going to bring a sleeping bag next time and just get really comfy.
His, you want to
My brother's 6'8".
come up?
And they sued the city.
Okay.
Made it clear that we.
Thank you.
Is there a?
Do you have, really quick before you leave, do you have an anticipated start date for opening, well, for construction? Sorry, Rick.
That's okay.
It's a question that's been asked multiple times by
We've been waiting all
residents.
night, so. We would love to start construction in April, if we can get through permits, and city staff has been wonderful to work with so far. The goal would be to, if we can get started in April, would be to open by Thanksgiving.
Perfect.
So we're shooting for that. It's very aggressive, so we're not promising. Don't want to put that out on Facebook. But
They're watching it on YouTube. It's done.
To whatever people out there, that's very aggressive, but we're pushing for that.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, because it would be nice to have you open for the holidays.
Thank you again.
Okay. Just leave for a minute.
Do we have the attachments that were sent?
We have. Paint a picture for us.
Rick, there's been a request for some of the councilmen who need to freshen up.
Okay.
Would you mind, while you're looking that up, if they took a 5-minute break? Wilton?
I need 20 minutes.
Does Rick have a presentation?
Okay.
Well, we don't have.
That's fine.
If you just pull up the agenda, you can probably go to the website and get it off there. Obviously, toward the sign.
Strapped. Been sitting there for 3 hours, over 3 hours. It's kind of entertaining.
Yeah, because I'm on.
I know. Feel bad for you.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, as soon as I hold it up.
I know, I'm just like,
I'd say get on the recorders, but I don't think the access is restricted.
usually we get up and we post, Jeremy, get up here. Now I feel
care
bad.
whose fault this is.
I don't care if David messed up, it's still your fault.
We got 7 Cokes left, so
Okay.
take it easy.
Let me,
Can they give you a small portion of Coke?
in the office, I took to my office at work, a picture up he painted. And I hung it on the wall, and it's to the side of it. Walking down the hall, I never noticed it. We're talking about it, and our HR director goes, I gotta point something out, so come stand here in the hallway.
Yeah, that's the first slide
And
here.
you look at the picture, my boy and I are pointing to shooting. There it is. The gun pointed to a picture on the other wall that kind of, because of the angle, looks lined up. It's a lamb and a lion laying there, and it looks like I'm ready to take an aim on one. So they've been talking about it, in the office going, man, you can't not kill anything. That's fun for you guys. Yeah, so the star,
Are these like 3 different options for the trails? I'm like, these trails all look the same.
well, the star represents the actual sign.
So you have the sign there.
Take a moment.
Yeah, it's gonna be just like Paul.
Just like
that.
Send me just, you got all the motions down. Crossing.
Not completely, but I'll review them tonight and tomorrow and send them over to you tomorrow.
That I don't believe. So I can look here and see if we got.
Add your mic.
Way to go. I like 7 Cokes people do.
How many Cokes did you bring?
I had to stop at the store, and like they only sell those little ones in like 8-packs, so like, but yeah.
How much left?
That-
Oh, okay.
That's the 8-pack.
Okay.
So I only drank half, but I drank it 20 ounces. It's like 4 a.m., so I'm like just, yeah. Thanks, guys. So
Sheesh.
I went home and was hoping to take a nap this afternoon. Like,
We, weather permitting, want to do it in March. Because once April comes, we don't have time for this. First part of March.
I think it'll be great.
Yeah, we're
Close proximity to people's crash.
We should make a sign that says, "Defend your knock."
Throw rock.
Just funny. After time, we'll look at March, everything. I got Peter's go down. What's going to be next? It's just this. It's hard because you did. Which is good. No, I totally agree with the purpose. It's hard as the case to do a consideration. Baseball. It's just weird. Well, yeah, it's yeah, you're right. Saved by Saratoga.
Thank you. That looks good to me.
During our halftime interval. Tempting. Shelley and it's been driving us to drinking.
Pass them down until they stop. I don't know. I'm good. I don't know.
Okay.
Drink your sandwich.
Super excited for this, Rick.
It's available on the you. Okay, Rick,
Excited.
thank you for your extraordinary amount of patience as we took one more break on you.
That's okay. Thanks for having me be here. So, I was asked to take a look at that property next to the fire station and see what we can do to create a mountain bike with it, a mountain bike park with it. So I solicited Dan McCrae's help because I know he's an avid mountain biker. I love mountain biking as well. So we went up there and a few times and walked it and really kind of got a feel for that area. And this is the design that we came up with these three these are actually sign proofs, and each sign represents where, you can see the star on the sign, where that sign will be located. Yeah, right there. This is kind of a preliminary idea of what we came up with. The blue is more intermediate, the green is more of a beginner. Yeah, exactly. No black diamonds, but we did have the skill track as a black, but it's not going to be a real black diamond. But you know, we were asked to not put man-made like structures built out of wood, like jumps and different features like that. So this is just more, actual dirt trails cut into the land, and this site's got a real nice slope to it. I mean, it could really have, the way we made it, really I feel optimizes that area. Blue, intermediate, that's a little bit faster. It's got a little bit more of speed to it. Better berms that will be created on that. The beginner's more, beginner. It's going to be longer, not quite as intense. And then kind of it's not going to be mandatory on how this is ran, but people have an idea that uphill is uphill, and we don't try to stay away from uphill. People coming down or coming up the blue, I don't think it's really going to be that big of a deal, but nothing that would be enforced or anything. But this is our idea. We don't have quite a design yet for the skill track. We just know that's going to be more added, like jumps and hills and maybe a little obstacle of some berms and things in that nature. But this is it. We were also asked about providing or installing pavilion, trash receptacle, picnic table, and
we talked about a bike repair.
yes, and thank you, and a bike maintenance stand. My first impression is to place it more by that first sign, by the first star. I feel like most people, when they come to this site, are going to park along 1200 North, and I think it would be easier for us to inspect it, to receive the garbage when it's collected, and I think that's more of a collection point for people coming and going and whatnot. That's it. As far as the design.
Is there a difference why you had the green versus the brown sign on the park sign, rules and regulations?
That's just a couple options.
Don't
right now we have green for our parks. Seeing how, this can be a park, but it's not necessarily a park with turf, but it's more of like a trail.
What do we do for our trail signs?
Aren't trailheads usually brown?
Trails are usually brown, and that's one reason I added the brown sign as a different option.
Because it's a bike.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Could we get a logo of the bird riding a bike? Just kidding.
I'm sure we can do anything.
Actually, can I add to the sign thing? So the email that you saw that I sent out about the Trails Master Plan, the Open Space Master Plan, that's one of the things that the DRC, the staff committee, discussed on some of the things we need to update and identify.
Bird riding a bike?
Yeah, the bird riding the bike.
Okay, got it.
Councilmember Wilden's head.
Well, you started right after he said that, and I'm like, you've been discussing this?
But discussing signage and distinctions in different trails, one of the ideas, so.
I'm catching up.
I don't,
We
are
got a bunch
you-
of wise guys.
I'm not sure the council's approving the signs tonight, are they?
This is just,
so.
this
I mean,
is just ideas that,
Obviously,
that
one-
we've had. And one other thing is I've reached out with the Westlake Highs Mountain Biking Club coach. I guess that's what you call him. And he's super excited about this. He actually lives in Sunrise. He says he knows 10 people right now that would go out and just love this thing, you know. But he did say he could get at least 20 people on a Saturday. They would come in, help cut out whatever we needed. He was more than eager to participate and be involved with this project. That gave me a lot of confidence that there's excitement in that regard. Local people right there in that subdivision.
I think this is awesome. I mean, this is one of our parks that's kind of been on the back burner for a long time. So getting this completed is just awesome, getting this started. And also the fact that it ties into our Powerline Corridor Trail, which is going to be a little bit more rugged. Yes, we'll leave it that way. And then it can tie into some other, facilities that we've got planned along that same corridor area. So this is great.
Scott, we wanted to utilize more in between that white trail and the green trail, but there's some really nice stands of that sagebrush and rabbit brush, and we didn't want to disturb it too much. I feel like this footprint that we're putting on really utilizes it both aesthetically and riding. Yeah, for the riding experience. It's not the biggest area. One lap is about, with the blue line, and the green line's about the same. One lap is about a half mile, which I think if you got someone out there and they're pretty avid and they want to get a good workout, going 2 laps, I mean, you're gonna get a nice workout with that.
I'd just like to comment, I think it's great that we're able to do this in-house, to kind of use your expertise to be able to, a lot of times for our parks, we have to go and get an engineer and all this stuff. And so I think it's great that we're using the skills that we have on city staff to do this, save a little bit of money in the meantime. But I think it's great. I think it's wise that it's located right next to the fire station, because I'm sure they'll get a little bit of work. Yeah, Chief left.
Yeah,
but,
the chief mentioned that.
But
to me.
we might want to keep the ambulance up here a little bit more often, I guess. So, but no, I think this is great. I think it'll be a great amenity. This is something that some people have definitely expressed interest that I've heard, and so I think it'll be a great thing.
Okay, Councilman Podesta, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question on the beginner trail. So for somebody that is like a true beginner, if they travel east on that trail and end up at the intermediate, are they stuck? Do they have to walk their bike back up the hill, or?
No. So yeah, right at that intersection on the east side, that section, I guess we should change that color to green, really.
The going north on that trail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they can get back to the starting point.
The actual intermediate part is south of the beginner trail.
Okay.
But where it connects, it's flat and.
Okay. I'd just be concerned
should
of
actually
younger kids that are in beginner, and then all of a sudden they end up, like using the ski analogy, that happened to me a lot when I was a kid, that I'd be on the green run, and all of a sudden I'm like, how'd I get on this blue or black run?
Yeah, true.
And then how do I get home now?
Yeah, just on the contour map, that's pretty consistent all through here, the same elevation, right along there, so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just wanted to bring up something I was mentioning earlier to you, that I think this is a great area to hold bike safety classes and so forth for the youth.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we don't need a motion on this, or?
No, we just wanted to make sure you were aware of what we're doing. Obviously, if you want to add, more to this park later, we certainly can. But we have time right now. We have an opportunity to at least get the first phases of this going. And so we wanted to jump on that with as minimum of fiscal impact as possible, but certainly get rolling on it.
And we've got the funds available to go ahead and get that pavilion and all that, get going on that, or?
For this first $20,000, I think we do. We had set some money aside for, like, I think Rick has about $50,000 a year to do various park projects throughout the year. And so we would be looking at, some of those funds and stuff for this, so.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council.
Rick, thanks.
Okay, Economic Development Plan, Resolution R18-10.
David?
Well, would you like me to go front? I'm up front, so.
All right, Mayor and Council. So I've sent the plan out to you a little while ago, and hopefully you've had time to review it and kind of look through it. Included in the packet is essentially the same thing with a few minor updates and whatnot. So I don't know if there's any specific questions, recommendations, or thoughts that you have with the plan. Essentially, the plan's approach was to get everyone on the same page. So developers coming in know what your expectations and priorities are. Staff knows expectations and priorities, and almost so that developers can kind of self-evaluate before they come to the table of kind of where they're going to sit, and all of you can gauge that as well. Of course, the way the Economic Development Plan kind of provides kind of a gauge to do that. It's not obligatory in any way. It just provides a sense of where you're coming from with your priorities, and hopefully helps put everyone on the same page, staff, developers, the public, and city council. So, and then, of course, it addresses the what, when, and where, and how the council's willing to participate in economic development. So I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Councilman McComber had a comment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just really appreciated the scoring approach, and just people can see where our priority is while getting higher score, et cetera, especially for any kind of economic incentives. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
The one point I just wanted to point out is, for consistency's sake, you refer to lakefront development. We want to make that waterfront. Because we have the
Sure.
river and the lake.
Sure.
And so there's just a few times, but that's just for consistency, because we did change that whole zone for a reason. So
Yeah, I'll
thank you.
put that in my notes.
Thanks. But I mean, seriously, I think this will be really helpful in your efforts as you work with developers.
Sure.
Councilwoman Barch.
On the level 2 priority level for locations of economic development.
Yeah, let me go to that.
Yes, page.
And you'll have to forgive, an extra page got added in there, but the page number should be correct.
So it should be page 11.
Page 11.
Yeah.
How may city incentivize economic development, that portion?
Where the city wants to see economic development projects, and then.
Where the city wants to see, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So then on level 2 in there, it says, north of Pony Express, but would require a downzone change or amendment that is inconsistent with the city's general plan. So we don't want to see a commercial downzone, but we would welcome a residential downzone generally. So I don't know how we can differentiate in that scenario. And I know we talked about the fact that we're not going to incentivize at all residential developments, but nonetheless, we don't want to.
Down to an R8.
Right.
Is there a more generic way that you might recommend expressing that?
Commercial.
Just I think just add commercial in there.
The commercial down zone.
Commercial down zone.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we have typically encouraged residential down zones
Right, that makes sense.
and decreasing densities. Yeah, so I think that might take care of it. And then, obviously, this is something that is, current, and as we develop as a city, some of this will change. So eventually, south of Tanner Lane, we will want to encourage also, but right now we're focusing on infilling, basically.
Yeah, so one thing that I really wanted to stress on this is that I tried to design it so that these are our priorities now, but they might not necessarily, we might get, if you notice, like, for example, I put medical as a level 2 type of industry. Well, that's because we know we have a couple hospitals coming in. And so, say we got a whole slew of movie theaters or entertainment industry, that your priorities might change in the next few years. And so these are our priorities now, and what the focus that we want to put out there publicly as we're working with developers and brokers and trying to sell ourselves and what we're looking for. So also Mark Christensen and I had a discussion about, to what level do we put our internal efforts in there. Well, internal efforts are sometimes fluid based on market changes or things like that, or So we tried to keep it pretty, give a structure of what we want to, what our efforts are going to be, but we didn't feel it was necessary to necessarily go into all the nitty-gritty of every application that we're going to do in pursuing economic development. So, but anyways, any other thoughts or comments?
Councilman Podesta?
Yeah, I just had a quick question as far as, so now that we have this kind of development plan in place, when are we scheduling to, work on actually developing these long-term plans as far as zoning and layout of the city? In particular, like the ones that I'm most focused on are the exploring development of waterfront shopping and entertainment areas, the city center district area plan, and marina master plan.
So keep in mind, one of the focuses that in going into making this was, we could have hired a consultant to put together a plan for us for $20,000 or whatever, but the fact of the matter was, we already had a few different existing plans that are very substantive, so that language you're referring to comes from some of our other plans, and so that's, those are more long-term efforts, and that's something that if you want us to, find out staff, we're going to have to talk before. I guess what I'm saying is I can't really answer your question right now because I'd have to talk with staff to see what steps have been made and what steps we're taking to address that right now. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's just the next phase then, is then we'll prioritize out of those projects which ones we'll actually start developing plan-wise.
So, for example, the Trails Master Plan, we're going to be redoing that this year. We've had that done since, I think, around 2000.
It's been 7 years.
Yeah, 2011.
Yeah,
so it's time to refresh that. So we're going to be working on that. The Marina Master Plan, obviously this last summer we had some changes where we dredged it and got it a lot deeper. So maybe it's time to dust something like that off. We just amended our general plan last year, so probably not spending a whole lot of time. Per your request, I'm meeting with SLR to talk with them about their district area plan, updating maps, and working on the allocation of the densities and things that we've experienced so far. So we're kind of working on different component parts. Our master plan is being reviewed right now, and so I think that kind of consistent with our strategic plan, there's just parts and pieces that we're always working together on. And certainly, for example, let's say you wanted to say, hey, let's brush up more on our economic development objectives related to commercial. We could certainly, carve that out. We've got an architectural conversation that we're going to be having in the very near future. So there's component parts to a lot of these things that we've just discussed with the goals that are all in play. And so it's just a question of, trying to balance that with, frankly, some of the applications that we're going to be getting as well.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is, and that's what Mark is essentially saying, is that the idea is every year as you're developing your goals, we look at these plans that we have. The idea behind this plan was to take all these plans that we have, that are sitting out there, and kind of putting them into one focused plan. And I know it's the economic development plan, but I've really tried to take a holistic approach to it so that each year as you're sitting down and you're looking at your goals, you say, we really want to focus on waterfront entertainment or something this year. We really want to push hard on these particular things. You can look at all the goals and objectives that have been set in these different plans and say, this is where we feel like our focus should be, and staff can make recommendations on focus. And I really wanted it to be a flexible, fluid document, but at the same time give a structure and give us direction within that fluidity, so we're not armchair quarterbacking our economic development. So. The only other thing I would add to that is I would add caution, though, each year as you set goals and plans with the priority levels, not changing them every year. I would strongly caution against that. You need to give it 3 to 5 years. That's why I made it a 3 to 5 year before you start changing. Unless there's a dramatic shift in the market, you really it takes a few years to bring things in. And so changing it every year, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So, and maybe I should add a little blurb about that in the plan. So. Yeah, don't shoot yourself in the foot, I was trying to see if I could work in a Wilden joke in there, but it wasn't working for me, so.
If I respond, I'm going to cough.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the final economic development plan, resolution R18-10 dated today with the change to page 11 that was noted by Councilwoman Barch.
I have a first from Councilman Podeska, or Porter.
A second.
That's twice tonight.
And I have a second from Councilman Podeska. Any further discussion on the motion? McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Podeska?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The Mayor Pro Tem appointment for 2018. In the past, as a council, we've just discussed that. Over the last year, Councilman Porter has been the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there anybody who wants to jump up and volunteer? Does council have preferences? I don't. Councilwoman Barch saying she will.
Michael and I have been the part of the staff since we've done it.
Typically, I'm the furthest out, yeah. Typically, what we've done as a tradition in our city is the people who are the furthest away from re-election is how it's typically fallen. I think that might be a smart thing to continue.
Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion from the council.
I'll move that we approve Michael McComber as Mayor Pro Tem for this year.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman Barch, second from Councilman Podeska. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Podeska?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The Legacy Farms Plan 3, Village Plan 3, and Box Culvert Saratoga Road Public Improvements Reimbursement Agreement.
Mayor and council, this is kind of the last of the reimbursement agreements. We'd originally planned on four phases worth of reimbursement agreements with Legacy Farms. This is just the final numbers, so these numbers aren't subject to change. This is kind of amending those numbers to match what the actual expenditures ended up being from the preliminary plans that we had. Staff would recommend approval of this so that we can get those reimbursements taken care of.
Perfect. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Can I ask a question first? Why are we removing again, this is because we don't actually have an exhibit in here like it says we have. We don't have any exhibits.
Sorry.
Where exactly is the box culvert that we're removing? Because to me, it sounds like we're removing the box culvert that we just put in.
No, so, good point.
I'm just saying.
On 400 South, we actually had two box culverts, one on the north side of the street, one on the south side of the street, and then we installed the super box culvert as part of the Tickville Walk
Saratoga, yeah.
So what this is doing is this is removing the south box culvert that is it's on the south side of 400 South. So there was two box culverts that come under the road and kind of meet on the opposite side.
Okay.
So this is just removing the one. We're keeping the northern
Why?
box culvert. Why are we removing? Because there's nothing that's emptying into it. It's just a void in the roadway.
So
and best practice is that we don't leave it for.
It's a liability.
Yeah.
Avoiding your roadway eventually will fill with things from above. And so there's a benefit when that void is serving a purpose to provide utility capacity, but when the void is basically not being
But we're
used.
only removing one half of it.
We're moving the whole thing. There's a box culvert on the north side that will continue to be used. The Patriot Park's tying into the north side.
Okay.
Box culvert. The south side's been abandoned. And so D.R. Horton has agreed to split the cost with us, so we're paying half their.
I guess I'm confused. This is not running north to south. This is running east to west?
East to west.
These are the old ditches.
Again,
These are the
no exhibit.
The old Tickville ditches.
Okay.
That one was on the north.
We've been talking about it for like 5 years and
Right.
very
but
intuitive on
there's
our part, so our apologies.
No exhibit here.
Yeah, no, so these are east-west crossings of
They're
Old
for the
Saratoga,
ditches along 400 South.
which on the south side, it's completely filled
Okay.
in.
D.R. Horton's advantage of having removed.
And it's to our advantage to have them pay for half of it.
Yeah. Okay, and then the only other question I had on here is in the, on one of the sewer lines where we are wanting the, number I, where we're wanting the 21-inch PVC main instead, it's a little confusing because it talks about the fact that the difference there, so that theirs would be, without the reimbursement, is 97, ours would be 165, and it talks about the main with the gravel bed and everything else, and then later on it goes in and adds in the gravel and adds in the additional depth on the collars and things like that. So is the up above just the additional cost for the pipe itself? Because that's not what it makes it sound like. Does that make sense, Jeremy, at all?
Yeah, the way the exhibit is broken down, it's broken down into sections. So some sections, you're talking about the first section along Schoolhouse Road?
Yes.
Itself.
Yes.
The other sections are different sections, so.
Because on the, as you go down, it talks about there are 3 parts that result in a whole amount of $126,199.80. But up above where it's originally talking about it, it says the PVC main is 165 total, and that's talking about the main with the gravel bed with an actual cost of. So that makes it sound like everything's involved and everything's included. And then yet you go down and you add in additional cost of extra depth and additional cost of depth of manholes.
I think in the first section, they have it as a like they have the difference, and then they have a section below that talks about the length again, as the length, and I think they did the calculation in the first one just to show how it's different, and the other ones, I agree it's confusing, but.
So I just want to make sure we're not.
They're going deeper, so to accommodate our impact fee and, getting reimbursed through impact fees, or credit through impact fees, we not only had them upsize, but we had to go deeper, because we have to go deep enough to go back into SSD and
right
up the existing line.
I just wanted to make sure we're not double reimbursing.
No. We've gone through these quite a bit, and these numbers appear to be right. And overall, it's actually to our favor. So in the long run, we thought that this was, it's a good partnership where we're upsizing lines through their project and things of that nature.
Bottom line, it's in the impact fee facilities plan, which means it kind of, the impact fee obviously went up. Every project caused it to go up, so it went up, and then they're reimbursing credit on themselves. So it's basically, like we talked about with the other projects, this is an opportunity where instead of having to borrow money, developer paid for it, which is cost to us, at no interest to us, and then they're getting credits against themselves. So this is the preferred way of building projects when we have developers that are looking to do this, because
Absolutely.
for us borrowing money.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve Legacy Farm Village Plan 3 and Box Culvert Saratoga Road Public Improvement Reimbursement Agreement Resolution R1812 dated today.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilwoman Barch. Is there any further
Councilman Podeska.
discussion on the motion? Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Podeska?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Comber?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have minutes from February 6th.
I move that we approve the minutes for February 6, 2018. I didn't see any changes. I don't think there were any.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Cindy didn't get any changes today.
I have a first from Councilman Comber.
Second.
Second from Councilman Podeska. Any further discussion? Podeska?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Comber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have
Can I just
reason.
say I like the summary style of the minutes?
I did.
We have reason for closed session. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved for the reasons listed on the agenda.
Second.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, second from Councilman Comber. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
passes unanimously. Okay.
Let's get it quick.